Right. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here at morning. Still okay. Morning. It's 11:05. April 4th. This is our first regular meeting of the month of April for the Board of County Commissioners. If I could ask everyone to please silence your phones and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, that would be appreciated.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first on our agenda is the approval of our agenda. I don't think we have any amendments or changes.
Actually, I have professional services contract, I didn't get an invite to the agenda.
Okay, we'll probably have to add that for our next meeting. What is this for? Oh, okay,
Or Andrea, help out.
okay. Can we add this to our next meeting, or do you need a special meeting to consider it? Okay, okay. We'll get that on the list for our next meeting. Thank you. Okay, any other agenda changes or amendments on the 14 items of new business?
None for me.
No, none for
Okay.
me.
Sam, Chris, anything? Okay, excellent. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
So moved.
Well, second.
All right, any further discussion?
None for me, thank you.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alrighty, and we will go into community informational items. Commissioner Marcella, do you have anything for us today?
Sure, so it just has under there on the agenda, just a couple updates on, the LURA, the transit and economic development updates. So from the county perspective with the LURA, the treasurer's office and I have been working to get the consultant, some of the financial reporting of the increment that's been dedicated to the plan area. And so I think that they finally have all the reports that they need to finish their work. And then we're going from there internally as the Urban Renewal Authority Board. As far as transit goes, no current updates. Tim and I will meet with our transit consultants tomorrow and should have an update by next week. But the ball is still rolling. I think Chris has one more legal document to review, and then we'll have those background documents and that work done to prepare for an implementation plan. As far as economic development updates go, still continuing to work with the Economic Development Corporation as the county's member on that board. I feel like things are going very well. We're on the up and up. So we're reviewing currently our strategic plan, making evaluations to that plan as needed, and we'll have our second session of that on April 12th. And then go from there with the next steps of our outreach to membership. So that's what I've got for today.
I have a question for you on the LURA.
Yeah.
Is there any, are there any developed programs yet? Okay. Is there
No.
talk about getting that? I mean, that's kind of been talked about since the inception of the URA.
No, we haven't. We've been trying really just to get the financial stuff kind of reined in. And so once we have that, then the next step will be for our consultant to do a financial projection. And then from there, I think we will have an idea of what the revenue will look like, and then we can develop programming.
Okay.
So those are our next steps, and I think that Carrie finally has the information that she needs to start working on financial projections, and then we'll be able to bring back information on any programming, and then an update on our affordable housing work that the LURA is doing as well.
Okay. I know, the Regional Housing Authority meeting, when Chapin, the city planner, had presented the Housing Historic Preservation Commission and the landmark work going, talking about doing any improvements on any residential, and it was brought up as a suggestion or a curiosity whether or not like the URA might develop some funding to support any requirements. And I realize that that would be in a smaller portion of the historic landmark, but
Yeah.
it's good to hear that there's consideration for some of that.
Yeah, I think,
supporting some regulation.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to get through the first pieces of that, and then we'll get rolling into programming and those kinds of things.
Commissioner Feedley?
I said a quick question or on the economic development and EDC. I'm really glad that things are going well there. I was really encouraged by that meeting that I went to.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing, given that there isn't staff and we're relying on that sort of volunteer board capacity, I'd still be interested in revisiting with us whether we want to make available funds to commission some kind of supporting consultant study, either make that available to the EDC or do it ourselves as input to that. So maybe we can sort of put that in our brains for future discussion.
Totally, and I'll be happy to give an update after our meeting on the 12th, kind of where that lands, because I think that's part of where that conversation is heading, is like if we do need a staff member, what caliber of staff member do we need?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a staff member that is able to take a marketing plan and distribute that and incentivize that, and then bring in a diversity into the economy? Or do we want to hire a staff member that can tackle some low-hanging fruit and then move into something bigger? So I think that those are all conversations that will happen on the 12th, and then we'll be able to bring that back to our respective boards and see if that's something that everybody still wants to progress towards. But I will definitely make sure that that is communicated to them too.
Okay.
Tim, on that note, do we have a status on the RFP that we put out for the lodging feasibility study?
Yeah, we've received proposals back from it. They are being evaluated between EDC, the president of their board, and then I can't remember if it's taken down or not. We're not waiting for Adam to get back from paternity leave, but we are evaluating the proposals we've received.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, that's all I got.
You have updates?
Yeah, just maybe on the Justice Center, we are continuing on the sort of 3 paths that we outlined. So the first path is continuing to work on sort of plan A of the full courts, detention, and law enforcement and dispatch on the Monroe site, our Union Pacific site, but with a 1 or more year delay. The goal is to continue to just sort of wrap up all loose ends and outstanding questions, and go back out for pricing sometime in the fall and see if we can, with additional design work, and maybe more availability of subs, get better pricing on that. Related to that, we did submit amended grant to the underfunded courts. We had to withdraw the $2.2 million that we got because that was for 23 construction, which we won't be doing. But we did resubmit for a chunk of the ongoing design costs for this year to get us to that repricing point. Also, just a heads up on that sort of plan A, we're gonna have to give the design team some direction on mechanical choices. So there'll be a conventional sort of mixed electricity, natural gas, and then one option is an add alternate for all electric. And so wait for a wonky memo from the design team on, because there are lots of trade-offs in terms of impact on potential like utility costs, upfront costs, and then what energy or greenhouse gas emissions savings we get. And it's not straightforward. So I'll look out for that wonky memo. And then the second option was phasing. That's I think being still looked at just to sort of see. I think the hope is that the existing design team can do that, but we're still working on who will do that sort of phasing analysis of those 3 chunks going in different phases. And then the third is to examine the potential for renovating or expanding this current courthouse. and that draft RFP has been prepared by the owner's rep, and Tim and I are reviewing it, so we'll have, hopefully have that out on the street somewhat soon to do both the mechanical assessment and then the sort of schematic design options for this site. And maybe one thing, we had been thinking about doing a DOLA application to cover some of that examination of this site, but because we sort of need to move faster than we can get the DOLA money in hand. And by the time we broke it up, it was gonna be a pretty tiny DOLA grant.
Okay.
So we didn't submit that.
Okay.
So yeah, so things are moving.
Is that it for you? All right. I have some updates on Housing Authority, water and wildfire mitigation. Our Housing Authority had a strategic, first of probably a few more strategic planning sessions yesterday morning, to kind of, we've been really wrapped around going vertical and the DOLA incentives, grants and infrastructure, and realize that we need to look at expanding into other programming, and figuring out how we can help enhance accessibility and utilization of existing programs with other partners like the COG. So that was really great, and we'll continue that conversation. We have a meeting on the later this month, wrong month, maybe the 18th, Wednesday. Standing meeting on the third Wednesday, I think it is. 19th? Okay, thank you. And we will be going to the school district to let them know that it is time to get our legal counsels engaged in starting negotiations with the landowners, which are the school district and the county. We do have still a little bit up in the air on one of the 3 parcels in the project. I'm waiting to hear back from EPA and CDPHE on that. Possibility to continue to include that in that project. We are working through and looking to get those green lights from DOLA to put out the RFP for the infrastructure work that should be happening this year. On water, Bryce and I had a meeting with the division yesterday and got some good next steps and some tasks that we need to check off the list, which I think will help us towards moving and revisiting, kind of getting reacquainted with things water for us to move on, establishing our enterprise and any engagement with what we've been talking about, Arkansas Water Conservancy District, for a professional service agreement to administer the augmentation application administration process. And wildfire mitigation, today we have our 4th Health Council meeting this afternoon up at CMC or virtually. ARWIC will be facilitating the majority of that, our Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative partner. But that is moving really well with all the acres that we have to dedicate to on-the-ground treatment this summer and in the next several years to come. And again, hoping that Team Rubicon, who we were able to meet with a few weeks ago, will come out and maybe join our Lake County Conservation annual meeting on April 18th. Everyone is invited to that up at CMC, and continuing to organize that education and outreach to get folks connected with available resources.
I just have one thing to add when you're done.
I am finished.
Okay. I just also wanted to mention that there is a lot of work going on between CCAT and CCI regarding land use, and Senate Bill 23, is it 313? And so the bill wouldn't apply to us because our county doesn't meet the threshold of any of the situations that are outlined within the bill, but there are incentives in the bill that we do need to look at, like intersection with 1041 powers, use by right, density caps, property tax equity for short-term rentals. So some of those things that are coming very fast and furious. So there are a couple meetings coming up tomorrow and the next day on those with some of our legislative partners that we'll report back on once we hear kind of how that moves through with any amendments or opposition.
Thank you for that, and I think we do intend to set up a work session, I think pretty soon, to kind of cover legislative items and where we're all at across departments too, to get and give the feedback, because I know Public Works and Building and Land Use and Human Services are especially kind of keen on a lot of what's going on now, as they can affect us. All right,
I have one more update.
Please.
Just so this morning, the last weekly project meeting for the Southern Fire Station happened.
wow,
So the punch
congratulations.
list will happen in a couple weeks, and the
Yay.
thing we'll get is a bit of occupancy, hopefully by the end of the month. For those who don't know, that is a multi-year epic saga that is coming to a close.
Yeah, we're still going through some litigation with that, but that should tie up at the end of the year, so.
Okay, yeah. It might be a sequel.
Yeah. So, okay.
Thank you, awesome. All right, any commissioner clarifications? I don't think I have any.
I don't.
None for me.
All right, we'll move into public comments on items not on the agenda. Anybody wishing to speak either in the room or online, please raise your hand, give us your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes, and any follow-up. Public comment is not necessarily a place for discussion, but we will surely follow up with you and or connect you with appropriate staff for any follow-up. Are there any public comments in the room? Don't see any hands going up. Anything online? Going once, going twice. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to new business. First on our agenda, we have the second reading of ordinance 23-01, an ordinance addressing multi-purpose use on county roads. This had been tabled from March 21st. Thank you very much. Anne, our director from Community Planning and Development, will lead this discussion, and we'll go through the public comment portion again on this, but we've had a lot of iterations of public meeting, but we'll do that again for this final consideration. Please go ahead, Anne.
Great, thank you so much. Sarah, would you mind screen sharing our website, the kind of the
Sorry.
OHV overview is on there, and I just think it's a really continues to be a great tool to kind of just lay out. So it's over here on the right side, the very last item, and if you scroll down, it kind of shows our timeline and where we are today in the creation of the ordinance. And so you will see that we're at April 4th there on the timeline. And so we're presenting the ordinance today to the board for adoption. And based on our last conversation that we had on the 21st, there have been a couple changes made. Most notably was the removal of the standard for commercial OHV, limiting the width of vehicles. That has been removed. We also made a notation that participation for commercial use in maintenance was winter maintenance. So we emphasized that was not in there previously. And then based on a comment that we received from the public, we also, it's just kind of a clarification that staff had sent over to the board. Under definitions, we added a statement that just says, for the purposes of this ordinance, all standards associated with OHV shall also apply to snowmobiles. Looked in a lot of different areas, whether OHV was, snowmobiles were included in them or recognized separately, and it varies. So for purposes of this ordinance, we just wanted to recognize that wherever we're talking about OHV, we're also talking about snowmobiles. So just a point of clarification on the ordinance. So we do have that today for you for adoption, and some other items that we just want to make sure that we bring forth for your consideration is, first, we have 14 pages of public comment. Everything that either we received through the online portal, through the website, or anything that we received as staff. So we do have 14 pages, and because of the amount and depth of this, we're providing it to you in a written format for your discretion on how you'd like to move forward with that. But we just wanted to provide it today.
And we've
Yeah.
seen,
You've seen the majority of all of these.
yeah.
Was the folder updated with any additional ones? Any
So,
additional-
anything that came in through the website is actually on the website. So we went with IT, we wanted the public to be able to see what those comments that were coming in were. So
Okay.
when you go onto the website, you can see anything that came in through that means. And then the additional comments were sent to you, but then are now compiled in this list that we've emailed over to you as well, so that you have everything. I think the biggest takeaway that staff has from the very robust public comment that we got back is that we really need to continue to educate and explain the scope of work and the process that's happening right now. And first of all, this is not a new ordinance to Lake County. We're not, this isn't the opening the door to allowing OHV on county roads. This is a process by which we are identifying commercial use. So as far as the last ordinance, it was completely silent. Therefore, we interpret that as being prohibited. And so we wanted to add in the ability for commercial use to be a use that's considered on county roads. And so that has been added. And the only other revision at this part of the process is just an emphasis on appropriate public use for OHV, that it is really intended to allow the opportunity for recreational use and not for use that would be typical of primary transportation. So no Safeway trips, no post office trips, no retail uses, things of that nature. However, we did have a comment about that as well, and something that we probably need to consider. We have a resident that OHV is their only means of transportation, and in order to get access to certain amenities in town, it is important for them to be able to utilize it. So lots of consideration, great information that's coming from the public. But I think the biggest takeaway, like I said, is that this is just part of a very big process. We provided a Gantt chart last week that really outlines the scope of work, and we're going to have an opportunity to bring a town hall setting again, so that we can bring the community in. Community engagement in this is obviously critical for the best outcomes. And so in bringing this iteration of the ordinance today to the board, this is by no means the end of this process. It's actually, in a certain aspect, only the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us in creating the road use guide, which will be a flexible tool moving forward, a meaningful tool for the county to be able to use and fine tune what degree of use and what's appropriate, as well as public works projects that come up from time to time to increase the quality of those accesses. So, and then we will be working with law enforcement to look at the enforcement piece, and a big part of that, though, is education and outreach to youth. We want to find opportunities to engage with our OHV track and maybe some programming that supports local youth in responsible use of OHV. I know that is a big public concern. We do have examples within the public comment of seeing perhaps youth in danger in our community with the way that they are utilizing OHV. So obviously that is a critical need and part of the scope of work that will be done. There's concerns that OHVs are in areas that we don't want to see that use, and so that'll also be an enforcement piece of the work. But we're hoping to create some great tools through the scope of this work, and so again, I'm just wanting to really spread that education piece, that this is still a work in progress. And so this part of the process is just this iteration of the ordinance, knowing that after we get through the work, we'll have a final ordinance that we'll be bringing forth that will be reflective of all of that inclusive work that's going to be done. So I would just ask if there's any questions about anything that we brought forward today. Our next, after today, is really diving in to that scope of work, and as we've outlined, the Gantt chart is very ambitious, but it would hope that we would get through this work prior to the end of the moratorium. So that's in October, but on our Gantt chart, we would like to be done in sometime in August, if possible. And one of really critical pieces is the creation of the special use permit, which is a permit that will speak to use on the roadways. And so that is really needed to support our commercial users as well in consideration of their operations. We continue to be in conversation with the majority of the commercial users that are specifically in need of seeking a conditional use permit. And once we have the special use permit, it'll be a tool to engage with all of the commercial operators that are in existence today. And so I think that's pretty much wraps up where we are, but love to receive any questions or anything that you'd like to see included within our next steps. And
Thank
here is
you.
the ordinance.
Okay.
The only question I have really is around the public comment. I think it's fine to just acknowledge that and keep it on the website. I would just refer to legal about anonymous public comments. I don't know that it's appropriate to keep anonymous comments out there, but I'll refer to you.
It's fine to keep on there, but in terms of making them a part of the public record, if you will, typically that's not done, because, you know, because that appear here, we ask them to identify themselves, to confirm they are the county residents or operators and stuff like that. So, but it's within y'all's discretion as to what you want to include.
We really appreciate that. We have seen, and we would encourage that, you know, where this has been a new process for CPD in having an online form to provide comment. And so what we were thinking about doing, and love legal's input on this, Chris's input, is a disclaimer on there that says, please provide, if you'd like your public comment read into the record during, especially a quasi-judicial and not a legislative process, you need to provide your identification information, and we'd be happy to include that on the record. But anonymous will just be provided to the board. And so we thought that would have a lot of value to making sure that we really embrace our processes and gain good, insightful, meaningful input from the website. Since this is kind of a new platform for us, we wanted to make sure that we are putting out the right expectation and making sure that that's very clear and transparent.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I'm working with Tim now. Congratulations. Thank you. And welcome aboard. Don't know what to say.
There we go. Sorry, guys. Yeah, you're good.
Go ahead, Commissioner Fiefling.
Oh, thanks for that overview and all the work. And really more a comment than a question. I just want to make sure that the sort of education and some of the enforcement stuff doesn't get lost or forgotten, because I do think that's such, I from some of the public comments we've got, and both written and verbal, a lot of what's going on that is a public safety issue and annoying people is really an enforcement and education issue. We're focusing on things we have direct control over with the ordinance and the SUP process, but I just want to, whatever we can do as the BOCC and the county to sort of be a part of those efforts, but just make sure we don't all forget to be a part of that.
Yeah,
For sure.
and absolutely, yeah, and I know, I think we're all aware, but just that'll be conversations across city and county with sheriff's office and police department, because it doesn't pertain to one jurisdiction or another. It's across both.
Absolutely. Yeah, I reached out to the city today, expressing our desire to, and looking forward to working together, because obviously we need to make sure that we are working together, tracking together with something that's going to work for the community. So, and also, just in saying that recreation would be able to hopefully partner with us as well, Maybe this is some youth programming that can be supported through that as well. So I think that we're open to all
Yeah,
ideas right now of how we support the community through this and provide safe alternatives to some of the activities that are happening right now.
yeah, I think there's great promotional opportunity with like the motocross track or the snowmobile club, the wheelers, other recreation groups out there, yeah. All right, well, I will read this into the record.
And I do think you can just reference it
The
by title.
Oh.
Yeah,
All right,
you just have to do the title and what it's referenced, because it's already been published and the
okay,
revised version published.
okay. All right,
Do you mind if I stop sharing the screen before we do that?
please, yeah,
Okay.
sure,
I just want to be able to monitor this for anybody that raises their hands if we
great,
need it, or
Okay.
participants.
thanks. One other quick comment before I open up for public comment on the ordinance, if there are any further public comments. Definitely appreciate that clarification on that winter maintenance, that was highlighted specifically through these early conversations. But I also don't want to lose the fact that, you know, a lot of these conversations will include public works and signage and seasonal determinations from that department on the condition of the infrastructure of the roads. So, you know, that could also span across summer and mud seasons. But we'll understand more there as we go through that process to develop the special use permitting and other designations and considerations. All right, I'd love to open it up then if anybody has comments on the ordinance. I'll invite you to speak now. Please state your name and address for the record. Mayor Labbe.
Greg Lobby, 130 St. Louis Avenue. Representing the city really does support this ordinance. We would also support some sort of sticker program for the county, and I know it's not in here, but I thought it might be wise to put it back in by reference, so that in the future you have the easy ability without changing the ordinance. It's just a thought, you know, in terms of what the direction I think we're going and the direction I think we need to go. I would also suggest that I would like to invite Stand the Trail to come up here this summer a couple times, just to do outreach and education on OHV ethics. That's what they do. And so I like what you've done here, and I approve the devil's in the details. That the special use permit will be, you know, the defining factor in all of this. But thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just react to that. So this is the first of what is intended to be probably a second iteration of the ordinance. And I believe going through some of the earlier inclusions in here, like GPS or enforcement pieces and the sticker program, would end up in that second iteration of the ordinance once we've gone through the special use permitting process and really vetted some of those other elements. Thank you. Any other comments? I have a hand up online, QUC. Would you please state your name? Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes, you might be a little broken up, but we can hear you, I think. Go ahead. Would you state your name and your address?
Yeah, yes, my name is Tom Sobel, and I actually live in Salida, 326 East 4th Street. I'm representing an organization, the Quiet Use Coalition, which has numerous members that reside in Lake County and visit Lake County. We're a statewide organization, a nonprofit. And I personally lived in Leadville for 17 years. Just 3 points on this. Have the commissioners seriously considered the risks and benefits of allowing public OHV use on county roads? It just seems like you've kind of rubber stamped past decisions to allow that, to modify state baseline conditions. And we haven't seen any kind of assessment of that by the current commissioners. Another comment is the enforcement and education piece is good. It's going to have to be a lot of education because As we know, county sheriffs do not have to, they can selectively choose to enforce or not enforce any kind of regulations. And unfortunately, in the past in Lake County, a lot of the county sheriffs have chosen not to enforce the OHV ordinances. And the third comment I have is with regarding, do the county commissioners even care about climate change and promoting the use of polluting recreational motorized vehicles purely for recreation, which are not as efficient or regulated by the EPA like regular passenger cars are? And do you consider that? I mean, we have all these state initiatives that are trying to limit greenhouse gas emissions, yet Lake County is promoting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Is there anybody else? I'm watching, I don't see anybody.
Any other public comment? I guess I would have a quick response to that too. As you mentioned, Anne, this is not a new ordinance for us, and it has been in place for quite some time. So the board and the county are considering very heavily impacts on, things from the environment or the infrastructure to our values and identity of economic development and encouragement. The easiest thing for us to do, as many have not even entertained it, may have been, though maybe not politically, but may have been to rescind the ordinance altogether, but we've chosen to go through this process to really vet that. And this first iteration of the ordinance really is kind of just establishing the awareness. And as Mayor Labbe said, the devil will be in the details of all those considerations through the special use permitting and other specific designations of roads that might come out of those conversations to come through the moratorium. Do we have any?
Can I add quickly to
Yes,
that?
please.
I mean, in addition to you mentioned the limits on the commercial, but I think what's lost is like the current paragraph 7 still has the point A to point B language, but we are gonna be developing that roadway use guide that will apply to individual public use. And I think that, that roadway use guide will be where, some of the devil in the details stuff comes out about, use on, very different kinds of county roads, everything from big paved highways to subdivisions to, non-stock OHV use. So, I think there'll be a lot of detail still to come as we flesh out that roadway use guide.
Yeah. Okay. Any other public comments? To wrap that up.
I remember at one point, Commissioner Fiedler at the last
Could you
meeting.
state your name real quick?
Tim
please?
Winger, High Country Tours, 5590, Highway 91,
Thanks, Tim.
was talking about vehicles being able to pass on the snowmobile trail. And for public use, is now the time that you want to put something in there about that? I understand for the commercial guys, you can handle that with the SUP process. Like the other day, we had a group of Tucker Snowcats come up Mosquito Pass. And quite simply, if somebody was coming down, the only way to solve that issue is for somebody's gonna have to back up to where you can pass safely. Because the trail's only 12 feet wide-ish, and those are 8 feet wide. So I didn't know if that, now is the time to address that or not.
I mean, my sense is that that's exactly what the roadway use guide with seasonal differences too will get into. It's like some roads, as you said, are, 12 maybe on a good day, depending on what erosion's been doing. And we could put in some real specific constraints on what kind of vehicles can go up there, or rely on signage, or what, whatever. It's like,
Roadway use guide tackled that issue for everyone.
that's how my brain is thinking of this,
Okay.
And whereas, there are other areas where it's much wider and graded and maintained in different, levels of use as well. I don't know.
Any other public comment? We'll close that up. Not seeing any. All right, we'll close the public input portion for our second reading. And I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve an ordinance 23-01, an ordinance addressing multi-purpose use on county roads.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
None for me, thank you.
None for me?
Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you so much, Anne and Bryce. Thanks to your team. Welcome, Cece. All right, sorry, let me get back to the agenda here. Wake my computer up. All right, and
I don't know, if you guys want to stay, you can, or if we can wait just a couple minutes if they, yeah, there you go. Just give everyone.
oh, shuffle now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that we can.
He had some questions, I just didn't directly with you.
I'll be watching.
Bye.
I'll reach out to him.
Have a good day.
You too, good to see you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, moving into number 2, consideration of file 22-36, 1719 Poplar Street, site plan application, also led by CPD.
Sure, so the site plan application is actually approved by the planning commission. So I'm gonna skip to can we do 2235? So they did provide a conditional approval based on the approval of the conditional use permit. So
Okay.
the site plan review is actually, application was conditionally approved by the planning commission. So I guess just an update of that.
So
Okay,
do we have to change our agenda for that? Because it's listed as 2236, not 2235.
do we have the wrong number?
It's, 2235 is the, conditional use permit multifamily.
Okay, so we had a
Typo.
typo,
Typo, so that should be,
but it's still it
It's
still
the same
references
It's the same
application.
address, that just
Okay.
references the accompanying, site plan file. So-
Okay.
Okay,
Just typo, okay.
Yep.
Great. So this was a file application on a conditional use permit for multifamily at 1719 Poplar Street. The site plan was conditionally approved pending the outcome of the conditional use permit by the planning commission. Today I'm bringing forth their recommendation. And during their deliberation, there were no changes. There were just a couple slight changes to their motion from what was in the staff report, but they were discussed by staff during the public hearing. And those were changing as we talked about, Poplar is still kind of an unknown, where property lines are and how that's going to affect the setback of the proposed location of the building. So the need for a variance in the staff report was indicated as a shall, and we changed that to may, depending on the outcome. Once we can the applicant can have that surveyed and the snow is no longer a barrier to getting that done. So that was a minor change. Also, the landscape buffer that we had suggested is just kind of an aesthetic aspect as we are trying to look at new development in a conscientious way. And would just kind of provide a buffer from the parking area and the structure itself and the highway. We changed that from they shall, again, to they may. Look for an easement with CDOT to include some landscaping opportunity there. So it's more of a suggestion. We do think that it would add a lot of aesthetic value for the community if they would pursue that. And then lastly, Within the staff report, there was a suggestion that in order to do the Poplar Street right-of-way dedication, that would need to be done by minor subdivision. However, after conferring with legal counsel, we were able to, land use legal counsel, we were able to discern that that could be done by a lot line adjustment through a subdivision exemption process. And it won't require a minor subdivision. So that condition, as suggested in the staff report, has been removed. And we talked about that a little bit in the public hearing. If I have a statement of motion to read into the record today, and recommendation from the Planning Commission. At its March 27, 2023 joint public hearing, the Lake County Planning Commission made, seconded, and approved by a roll call vote of 4 members in favor and 0 members in opposition the following motion. The motion having been made by Joey Edwards and seconded by Howard Tritz. The Planning Commission recommends conditional approval to the Board of County Commissioners on file 22-35, a conditional use permit application for a multifamily development at 1719 Poplar Street, Leadville, Colorado. The conditions for approval are 1, the conditional use permit is conditional upon an approved or conditionally approved site plan review. 2, the developer shall work with the Leadville Lake County Regional Housing Authority to determine a way to maintain and ensure the housing units remain as stated in the application, affordable workforce housing units. And number 3, short-term rental use is prohibited. Number 4, a development agreement shall be approved and signed by the applicant and the Board of County Commissioners and recorded prior to the issuance of the building permit. And number 5, all statements made by the applicant in the application and hearing shall be considered conditions of approval. And further finding that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies contained in the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. Number 2, that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use does conform to the requirements and provisions of this code. Number 3, that as conditioned, adequate public safety, transportation, and utility facilities will be available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service for existing development. Number 4, that as conditioned and proposed conditional use is not likely to be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare of county residents or to cause hardship for neighboring persons. Number 5, that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with and in harmony with neighboring land uses and future intended land uses in the area. And number 6, that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not result in overly intensive use of the land relative to the surrounding area. Number 7, that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not result in traffic congestion or hazards to vehicular or pedestrian traffic. And number 8, that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not unnecessarily scar the land on which such use would be located. Number 9, that as conditioned, the proposed site of the conditional use is not and will be free from natural or man-made hazards, or that such hazards can and will be adequately mitigated. I think the biggest takeaway was that on this application overall is that a variance was granted to double the density, the allowable density on this site, and to work with the mixed use development, but largely because the applicant has made a commitment to making sure that these units are affordable and or meet the workforce housing needs within the community as they work in conjunction with the Regional Housing Authority, and wanting that obviously to stay in perpetuity. So the condition to not allow short-term rentals certainly aligns with that goal, and this was a commitment made by the applicant, both in their variance application as well as in their conditional use permit. So to hear any questions that you might have.
I don't have any questions. To be transparent, I did vote against the variance application. I feel like the density and the traffic is going to be a very big problem on Poplar. Between the businesses and between Safeway and this business and Taco Bell, and I mean, we've already seen Taco Bell road closed by the sheriff's office because of too much traffic congestion, and so I did vote against the variance application. I was the only member of the board that voted against the variance application because I think the congestion is just too much to overcome in this situation, and creates a hazard for emergency services and access. So I just still stand by that decision, regardless of this conditional use permit.
Any other questions for staff? Or comments?
And maybe just a comment, yeah, I appreciate you raising that. I mean, it's not the fault of this applicant, but
No.
that, I mean, that parcel and that area is just a problem, especially since CDOT closed off different accesses off of 24, so, yeah.
I would just encourage the applicant through the next phase of the project to really work with those neighboring businesses and try to make sure that there's a plan in place, so that it doesn't become an issue.
Absolutely, and I guess just to highlight too, as a result of those concerns, we did have the applicant do a traffic analysis and a traffic impact study, which didn't result in the need for any improvements to access as far as like turn lanes or anything of that nature. You might have felt a bit surprising. We also raised up our concerns about kind of the chaoticness in that area. That Safeway doesn't have a clear entrance and exit
on that side.
Right, and so we did absolutely ask that the traffic engineers consider that in their analysis, and so that was completed. They provided a response. Again, it didn't result in any changes to that, but absolutely wanted, and also, just I think everyone's kind of aware that this has gone through a little over a 2-year process. This has been an incredibly difficult on both sides, both for the applicant and for staff, to work through the engineering aspect of this site. And so we have gone through, I think, about 4 engineering reviews to get to where the plan is today. So there has been quite a bit of work done on that, but I absolutely, this is, staff would suggest this is the busiest intersection in the county. And so to that end, we want to be really mindful, and so maybe there will be some future work that needs to be done in this area that might provide some better traffic coordination down the road too.
Well, maybe just add to that, I mean, that this intersection is within the study area of the other CDOT grant.
Yeah, that'll be great. I mean, I think without being able to really catch our breath, there's definitely been much activity, including in the city limits, in the rail yard, and it's like been compounded. It feels like some issues have been compounded every subsequent applicant that has come in, and it's definitely, thank you for like getting those resources to address that, because I think things from drainage and traffic and flow, we need to kind of set some expectations and requirements, or expectations on our side, even in, looking at signage, or like if you do redo something significant, big business, we would like you to put in pedestrian or multimodal infrastructure. So I am looking forward to that aspect, especially at the gateway, and as development continues through the rail yard. There's a lot of different things that
and to
be
further that,
better coordinated.
right, and to further that goal, this particular development has put in that connectivity with the sidewalk that was started with Taco Bell, and now will continue along that edge of the property boundary. And so we are increasing that degree of connectivity, and then also with bringing Poplar into a local road standard. And that will eventually continue on with other commercial use in the area. So we have Taco Bell's participation in that. They've increased the degree of stormwater drainage management in the area, as will this development and future increased degrees of use in the area. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction to the goals that you've mentioned.
That's the only concern I have, but I feel comfortable with it. I did, for whatever it's worth, listen to the hearing, so.
Well, to add on though, because just to further elaborate on that, that intersection is one thing, but then as kind of the I envision like development potentially appropriate development along Poplar, kind of replicating the downtown and that density. So if we don't deal with
Yeah.
our expectations of density now, there's gonna be, I mean, I just, there's potential for just that to increase along that commercial highway frontage, which I currently think is still appropriate, but we just might not have the right kind of planning or concepts in place to deal with.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, as part of the sort of, I think that no one property owner can really solve that on their own, especially in this sort of like piecemeal way. And then also, I think we need to have a hard discussion with CDOT at some point, like by blocking off access off of 24, they've created another problem on county and local roads. And
that's probably
there has to
something
be a
we can-
balance there. So I don't, for me, I think we need to revisit whether it's possible to open up some other access off of 24, so that it's not all funneling down
Mhm.
one road,
Yeah.
like a stone's throw from a traffic light.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Maybe that's where we talk about that in the LOF application.
Yeah.
That'd be a good place. Okay, cool.
Right, I have no other questions.
I don't have anything else either. Okay.
All right, I'll entertain a motion on file 2235,
36.
36.
35.
We're doing 35, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve file number 22-35, 1719 Poplar Street Plan Application.
Second?
Any further discussion?
Can I change my motion? I'm sorry, can I amend my motion to be the conditional use permit and not the plan application? Sorry,
Oh, yes, yeah, sure,
sorry.
sure.
Okay,
Remi-
my apologies.
No problem.
Okay.
All right,
And I will second that.
Okay.
all right. Okay, any further discussion?
No, anything.
Me?
None from me either. Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 And moving on to 2241, conditional use permit for the special event facility and private resort at Mini Placer, US MS number 6971, Chalk Mountain, Fremont Pass area at 6971 Forest Service Road 134. And also led by Ann. Do you want us to share anything?
No, I'm just hesitant for a moment because the applicant is, I do not see them online and they're not present.
Oh,
So I do have a recommendation to bring forth. It is different than, so I'm happy to share this information with you and give you the recommendation. I would also question whether or not maybe we should table the outcome decision since the applicant's not present, just in case there was anything, although the public hearing is closed and there's no evidentiary portion or opportunity still left.
My concern would be if it's changed from what was presented, by planning commission, there may be a due process issue allowing them the opportunity to hear of the changes, and if there is.
So they were present for the
Okay.
recommendation.
So you're not gonna present anything today that they haven't been here at the planning commission?
No,
Okay.
so I don't think there's really an opportunity for the applicant to really, have any input. I just want to note that I don't see them present, and, I don't think that, since our public hearing is closed, it's probably not really germane. But, so, I just wanted to
Okay.
note that.
yeah, thank you.
I have lots of questions if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we can revisit
through
that
that,
if there are
Yeah, y'all can
significant amount
decide
of
if you
questions.
want to carry it
Absolutely.
over based on your questions.
Based on your questions, and then we can decide where you'd like to go. So just, I guess, noted for the record, that the applicant isn't present. So this was a very difficult application for consideration. I would say, this took a period of time. And most notably, the biggest concerns were the access associated with this site, or lack thereof. The access to the site is through Forest Service 134, a portion of which is under BLM's jurisdiction and a portion is under Forest Service jurisdiction. And really, it was the degree of use versus the ability to come up with an effective evacuation plan to get participants out of the area. And so the applicant, as you know, was asking for a density of 150 people on site. However, through and I think this wasn't during the Planning Commission's deliberation, this was still in the public hearing. The applicant offered to say, well, based on what they were hearing, that they would like to consider it reasonable to maybe decrease the degree of use at this point in their application, and potentially maybe they would revisit if things changed. And so that was really part of the motion that's being brought forward, is hearing that the applicant was wanted that as a consideration. And so it definitely was taken into this formal recommendation that I'm going to provide. And, you know, overall, the partners to CDOT has not made a final decision on the access permit. However, I do have a message into Brian Killian, reducing the use from what's going to be recommended of 48 in the summer and 24 in the winter is considerably different. And I do think that'll change some outcomes with CDOT. There, some of the traffic impact study that had been provided to them had a lot of areas that needed to have more information provided by the engineers. And the concern really was at the larger group amounts, specifically at 70 and above. 150 would have needed either improvements to the highway as far as turn lanes, or the engineer was suggesting a shuttling methodology by which they would get participants in and out of the site, but that had not been vetted or presented as part of the application. So a lot of unknowns were included in that. So CDOT was not able at the time of the hearing to be able to provide confirmation that the access permit was going to be granted. But now, as you know, it's going to be a different conversation with them at these much reduced occupancies. The other was that BLM had reached out, Keith Berger from BLM, and had some further questions about the degree of use that was being considered. BLM offers a right-of-way lease agreement with the applicant, whereby they are able to park cars on either up to 12 cars on either side of the right-of-way, and up to 20 cars in a designated area that's owned by BLM. This has been a standing lease that the applicant has had. And it supported the Carner cabin that's in existence on the site that is being used as a short-term rental for up to 8 people, and was granted a conditional use permit some years back, I think in early 2000s. And we did question that conditional use permit that had been granted for a yurt. And then some difficulties were met in trying to design one that could meet snow loads at that elevation. And so it resulted in a cabin being built instead. The applicant suggests they haven't expanded the use beyond what they were permitted for, although staff would say, I think that might need some review if this wasn't granted. If this is granted, it would then replace the existing CUP they have. So I will read the recommendation in and then answer any questions that you have. But largely the changes that have been put into place really reflect the lack of access and what they thought was an effective evacuation plan for the area.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Just on, so that decrease to 48, that's going to influence the CDOT decision, not the other way. Not that CDOT has new opinions that might further influence the 48 number.
Right, correct. But I don't anticipate that will happen. I do believe at 48 they will most likely be granted their access permit.
Okay.
The pain points when I talked to Brian Killian really started hitting at about over 48,
70?
certainly. So the traffic engineer did 3 different scenarios. They did
Okay.
a 48 scenario, a 70 scenario, and a 150. So that's why we're kind of talking in those, in those parameters. But at 48, that would have hit the scenario A that was described in the traffic analysis. And that wasn't quite where things were going off the radar with CDOT's review. So it would align with that more benign, so to speak, aspect of the analysis. At its March 27th to 2023 joint public hearing, the Lake County Planning Commission made, seconded, and approved by a roll call vote of 4 members in favor and 0 members in opposition, the following motion. The motion having been made by Joey Edwards and seconded by Howard Tritz. The Planning Commission recommends conditional approval to the Board of County Commissioners of File 2241, a conditional use permit for a special event facility located at 6971 Forest Service Road 134, pursuant to the standards of Section 5.2.28, use standards for a special event facility. Further finding that the approved criteria pursuant to the Lake County Land Development Code, Section 3.6.1F, have been met as evidenced in that staff report dated March 27, 2023, for file 2241 and conditioned as follows. Number 1, an approved access permit from CDOT. Number 2, a CDOT approved safety plan if event staff is ever guiding vehicles onto Highway 91. Number 3, there shall be no outside alcohol allowed at any event. This shall be communicated in all marketing and advertising. Any alcohol provided on site is subject to the state of Colorado off-premises liquor licensing requirements as administered by the Lake County Clerk and Recorder. If an off-premises liquor license is approved, all servers must be TIPS trained with a record of such available for review. All alcohol sales shall end strictly 1.5 hours before the end of on-site events. Number 4, the operation shall be limited to host no more than 48 occupants, attendees during the summer, which is defined as Memorial Day to Labor Day, and no more than 24 occupants or attendees during the winter. And that is, we quantified that as after Labor Day and until Memorial Day. Number 5, any shuttle plan must be approved by Community Planning and Development prior to operations. The plan must include the parking area along with any required permissions or approvals, a contract with the business providing the service, an overall operational plan, and any other information the department may deem necessary. Number 6, the applicant shall create a guest operations and safety guide and provide a copy of the guide for the approval to CPD and county attorney prior to operations. The guide must include a 24-hour available emergency contact. Number 7, the guest operation and safety guide must emphasize situational awareness and physical expectation of guests. Number 8, prior to operations, the applicant must provide CPD with an approved sanitary waste management plan, which has been approved by the Board of Health as applicable, and a water supply plan approved by either Public Health or the Division of Water Resources as applicable. Number 9, the conditional use permit shall be reviewed on an annual basis administratively with the ability for the Director of CPD to elevate the review to the Board of County Commissioners. The applicant shall furnish an annual report due by January 31st of each year, which includes but is not limited to A, general standard operation report for the year in review, B, total number and types of events for the year, C, total number and attendees for each event, number D, record of all TIPS servers with proof of certification, number E, records of all staff emergency and medical certifications, item F, status of improvements, G, safety incident record, a report of any safety incidents to include but not limited to 1, any controlled or uncontrolled fire incident, number 2, calls to 911 for service, including requests for assistance from fire, EMS, sheriff, and SAR. Number 3, injuries treated on site, a description, a treatment given, cause of injury, and action taken to reduce future risk. The annual review may result in recommendations from CPD to the Board of County Commissioners to include but not limited to increase or decrease degree of use, recommend additional review, or recommendations for consideration of revocation. If the annual report is not received by February 15th of every subsequent year, the permit holder will be considered in default and subject to enforcement. Number 10, prior to any building permits or improvements on site, the applicant must make application for site plan review. Number 11, through the site plan review process, the applicant shall have environmentally sensitive areas identified. Identified areas shall be protected by restricting public access, including but not limited to areas like wetlands located near the stage. Number 12, all structures are subject to the Lake County Building Code and permit requirements. 13, prior to operations, the applicant must provide CPT with an on-site fire protection plan approved by the Lake County Fire Rescue, which may be subject to annual review. Number 14, the operation shall remain compliant with all use-specific standards 5.2.28. Number 14, any alcohol or substance recovery events shall be approved prior to rescheduling by CPD. At a minimum, the applicant shall contractually engage with a drug and alcohol recovery medical professional along with approval and coordination with Lake County Public Health. Additional requirements may be applied. Number 15, the temporary use permit issued by the Forest Service has expired. Permit must be renewed or reapplied for as applicable prior to any continued permitted activity. Number 16, prior to operations, the applicant shall provide a letter from CPW confirming all impacts shall or will be properly mitigated to CPD. Number 17, all statements made by the applicant and within the application and hearing shall be considered conditions of approval. And further finding that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies contained in the Lake County Comprehensive Plan, and as conditioned, the proposed conditional use conforms to the requirements and provisions of this code, and that as conditioned, adequate public safety, transportation, and utility facilities will be available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service for existing development. And as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is not likely to be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare of county residents or to cause hardship for neighboring persons. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with and in harmony with neighboring land uses and future intended land uses in the area. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not result in overly intensive use of the land relative to the surrounding area. As conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not result in traffic congestion or hazards to vehicular or pedestrian traffic. As conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not unnecessarily scar the land on which such use will be located. And that as conditioned, the proposed site will be of the conditional use is and will be free from natural or man-made hazards, or that such hazards can and will be adequately mitigated. There's a lot of conditions associated and recommended, and it really is based on the location of this operation. I don't foresee that all locations would need this degree of review and consideration. I know it's a lengthy, but I really think that it speaks to the location and lack of access. And Planning Commission really wanted to emphasize and make sure that it's in marketing, the expectation, the physical expectation to be able to access the site. If you have to hike, over a mile into the site with some elevation changes, just really wanting people to come, knowing elevation challenges already with high altitude sickness. It's really, they really want to use ag and marketing to make sure that participants are aware. Because emergencies on site could be problematic, especially during, this is our height of our special event use in the county. And so when we have, we're supporting those events, a call out in a remote location like this is going to really put a strain on resources.
Yeah. And just a couple things I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Number 7. Just some grammatical change, like emphasize, you have emphasis in there. And then was there, what I'm reading has 2 number 14s. Were they both still in there? And I'm sorry, I think I looked away from my screen following you reading.
Oh, no, well, I see I know on the, there's just a couple, on the other one that I read too. I caught those as I was reading them, and we'll get you a clean copy before we give it to recording.
Okay, so there are 18 conditions?
That's correct.
Okay. One is just double
14 and 14.
labeled, 14.
Yeah, I see some wonky spacing in there, I'm not sure why, so
Okay.
we'll clean that up real quick.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Okay, take it away, Commissioner Marcel.
Okay, so I know that we talked about the potential for shuttling to be mitigated with the lowering of the number of guests, but hypothetically, if that isn't, and in the hearing, there was talk of using like maybe John Herder's location of the zip lines or whatever, then I think that that is already problematic as well on 91, because of its location on that blind corner. And so, my request would be that if that is considered an option at all, that a traffic study is done at that location, because I think that that's problematic, and if that location isn't selected, then maybe we need to approve an additional location, because we are already struggling to find places for like park and ride for our own transit, without accommodating others. So that would be just one thing to maybe just remember in the checklist of when we get that traffic stuff back. I know that they said in the public hearing that they had contacted companies regarding the use of porta potties during events. I don't know if that was mitigated, and that they did find a company that felt as though they could take porta potties up to the event site. My concern is that if there is a spill, or there is a tumble, or there is an accident and sewage is released from a porta potty, how will the county know of that, and what is the mitigation for that? Because I think that that's a big concern. I think there's a lot of talk of composting toilets, and not any water up there. And I don't know the capacity of the current composting toilet that they had, but it sounded as though it sounded from the applicant that, like, well, we have a composting toilet and we'll use that until we get other things in place. And so my recommendation would be to not allow that to happen, because I don't believe that that can have the capacity to handle any kind of events at that location, unless it's approved through environmental health. Thank you for BLM comments. The access, did they define an egress, or just the singular point?
Just the singular.
Okay.
Just the singular point.
So, for me, I believe that they need to coordinate with the Office of Emergency Management in their yearly recap, and they need to give the Office of Emergency Management a schedule of events for the upcoming calendar year by February 15th. So that emergency management knows what events are happening there and how many people will be there, so that we have adequate response to any event that's happening there. And I think if you're booking, weddings and those kinds of things, you have those booked out far enough in advance that you should be able to provide that to our Office of Emergency Management. I saw a lot of discussion in the staff report regarding search and rescue, and I did see that in the comments coming back to emergency management that they mentioned that SAR would be invited to attend the event in addition to hired security staff. If that is in fact true, SAR needs to be compensated. That is a resource that the county pays for, and it is not fair that other people will go without that resource if it is there. So I would highly recommend that we condition that as well. If that's something that they plan to do, they need to compensate them for it. And then I think just the water and the sanitation issues and the primitive camping on that site, I think just the whole thing can be kind of concerning, but those are my comments taking away from the staff report and the hearing, kind of in a big nutshell, I guess.
Absolutely.
And I did know that, and I may have heard wrong in the public hearing, that the applicant did reference an event that they had held in June. And so I'm curious about current compliance and what that will look like going forward.
Yeah, those are all great points. So I think first was the transportation that I heard, absolutely.
Yeah.
That has not been something that's ever been brought forward. Jack House Jamboree that had previously been brought in as a special event. There was some ideas about parking on at the zip line and using that, but certainly we have nothing that's been vetted or brought forward. I think at the 48th though, I think that they're not proposing a shuttling plan.
Okay.
I think the shuttling plan was at the higher volumes.
Okay.
But if they do decide that shuttling is an issue, because they also will have challenges with CDOT because they won't allow loading and unloading within the access point area.
Right.
So how do we get shuttles up to the offloading on the BLM parcel? So, there's a lot that would have to be done, absolutely about that. Absolutely on that's the condition that any activity is going to need to have an approved sanitation plan. We learned kind of with the Tennessee Pass, your special use permit that we had last year, that even the way in which composting toilets were approved by the Board of Health previously and being able to discharge gray water, that may not be what will be acceptable coming up. So absolutely, so we do have that condition in there to make sure that we're monitoring any future use on site. Certainly, there could be a condition more about monitoring or that covers that what if there was a spill on site. So definitely I think that's another good aspect, and absolutely we made note in the staff report that and so did Claire from emergency management, the invited, obviously they should be contracted with. And that that's great to offer the scheduling, so we can certainly incorporate that into the condition as well. Those are great.
Sorry, sir.
I just wanted to make I appreciate all your points as well, and the I don't think it can hurt, and you do a very good job at keeping reminding us like where that points, all these specific things will be looked at and vetted in their own separate process. Because every time I hear composting toilets, I think of something that's it could be a pit toilet potentially of some sort with the appropriate structure and solar heating, all the things. But it just has to have all those elements, and I think essentially in my head, what it would probably look like would be pit toilets or something if porta potties were not able to get up there. But again, I do think that's.
And I just definitely would want that to be in, which I'm sure that has to be in place prior to the certificate of occupancy, not the certificate of occupancy, but the approval of the site and the permit. Like those pieces have to be approved through environmental health prior to them holding events anyway.
Right.
So I just asked that, and I just. The water, I hope that they have a plan for water, and so I'm glad to see that that's conditioned.
And hopefully bringing it back annually with the ability for it to be elevated to the board. To just kind of review how, what it's been, the record, how was there the spill, was there anecdotal proof that are functioning well, so that you just kind of have something to monitor and given location and the challenges and the degree of use.
Yes, and
there's
just
a lot
that,
of different items they've suggested on the site.
And just the access of even 70 people accessing that is a lot when 70% of our workforce commutes, and that highway is used frequently, multiple times a day. Not to mention heavy truck traffic and all the things, like adding an additional 70 people to go hang out up there, and then an emergency. And I think that, Mr. Edwards made a good point too in the hearing about, if there's a wildfire, you add panic into the mix and a singular access point, and it's like, how are you gonna funnel people out of there, right? And if a fire starts lower than that location, fire goes up, right? So like that is a concern for me as well. And so if the applicant is feeling good about that risk, I think that they should advertise that as being a risk, that, we have a singular access point. You are in the high country. You are in the middle of the woods. There is the chance that there's a wildfire. There is the chance that in this small community, we don't have the resources to get you out. For whatever that might be worth, but, and maybe they'll hear that, but, it's just, that's a lot in that location, a lot.
Yeah, I think the really challenging thing about the onset of this application was that there were so many different variables and confidence in understanding what they were presenting and offering as mitigation. Water being one of those, like, I think it could be done with or without water, but you have to have a clear plan of consideration for providing amenities or setting that expectation. And the reduction in number feels better,
Yeah,
I think, in that location.
And 48 is a whole different thing than 150.
true.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions for staff on the application? Oh, I had checked in with you, and I don't know that you read it, the identification of parking, because that is a concern I have of just the general congestion down there at that area. Maybe do we want to add, I thought it was a great idea to do that, if for no other reason than to let general users of BLM and US Forest Service land who are parking in that area understand why there might be 20 cars sitting in the area and not moving or whatnot.
Right.
Can we still,
We suggest, we talked about adding a couple conditions, and that was a parking pass that would be provided by the Climax Revival, so there would be a parking
like sticker or
Sticker.
like thing hanging?
notice, yes, that would
Something.
be in the vehicle itself, so it could be identified, so if for enforcement purposes or just compliance, we wanted to go up and we want to make sure that we haven't exceeded the parking allowance on the BLM parcel, also for identification of who's in that, and then delineation of where the parking lease is, so that we, we can recognize the cars that are there associated with the use, and making sure that that the area has been designated as well. So maybe that's one condition, that the applicant shall furnish a
Placard?
parking pass.
Okay, yeah.
With instructions displayed in the cars, so that cars can be readily identified, and then delineation of the parking area. And certainly that could, we did talk about that being a benefit, to quickly identify the cars that are associated with the event. Particularly as, and it's gonna have a completely separate parking area, but you are going to hear a CUP in the general area, that's going to have some parking associated with it too. I think that parking is gonna be done on private property, but just generally, that's an area that a lot of cars accumulate to access different areas through the Forest Service access. So it would be good to be able to distinguish between what's happening there.
What are the additional conditions that you were?
Just that one,
Just the
like
parking?
adding a parking notification, so
Parking notification?
like actually fencing off or just showing you where the parking is supposed to be.
I
for
think in the
county.
field, they should have it,
Fenced
they should
off.
have it, as long as it doesn't violate the BLM lease for signage, or, if there's a way that they could delineate in the field so that you can see.
Where's what?
If we sent Jacob to just say, hey, how many cars are parked associated with conditional use permit, because we were doing a random just checking, he would be able to quickly see this is the parking area. So as long as it's not in violation with whatever limitations that the lease of the land may have, we wanted something that we could quickly just identify that. And then I think another condition that would not be addressed in any of your concerns, Kayla, would be adding that they provide that calendar of events to OEMs, so that those are on our radar for situational awareness. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I would add is that if they choose to invite search and rescue to any event listed on the calendar, that the search and rescue is adequately compensated.
That sounds great.
Okay, This one, parking delineation for the area leased by BLM, parking placard or notification of individual cars, search and rescue compensation, and,
Giving OEM a calendar.
oh, yeah. Is that not already required as a special facility
Special event facility?
permit?
No, because you have to go through the CUP process as a special event facility.
But they're including that here for this.
For-
But is it not already required in our special event facility permitting process to furnish a schedule of events?
Yes, with
An
it,
update?
you actually did the new standards.
So
I
that
think giving it to OEM, we just,
specifically, okay, very good. So we'll do specific to.
You had raised those sort of porta potties and chance of a spill, but it seemed like that was probably covered in the review criteria that's in there, reviewing
With, yeah,
the Board of Health and septic.
yeah, it sounded like Anne said.
so
I
I would,
have to have a plan for any event,
right, so they need an approved sanitary waste management plan. So
for
that-
any event.
Right, so that includes, if they come back with their variances from the Board of Health for any alternative method of sanitary waste management, as well as, we need more than, we need to know the company that said that they, and that they've given us a letter that says they can service the site or, safely, and that we've got some, positive insurance and things like that. So we want a whole management plan that is inclusive of if the variances has been approved, as well as management. If it needs pumping truck to come in occasionally, or it doesn't, if it needs porta potties to supplement, can we get up, can we take those down? There was a discussion at one point of bringing in like the big trailer set. I'm not sure that could access, but we want something in writing from the provider that they can
Yeah.
access.
Yeah, I think, because they did mention in the hearing that they had one provider that said that they would be able to trailer those porta potties all the way up to the site. And so I just think that if that's the case, we need to have that in writing from somebody, and then if those tip off the trailer and they're full, like, what's the contingency plan there?
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Right, so do we want to add the, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 conditions? 1, parking is delineated physically on site of the leased BLM, permitted BLM area, leased BLM.
So, yeah, I would just say, of the, leased BLM parking area as applicable.
Okay.
So that leaves, room for whatever, is allowed within the scope of their lease.
Might change, oh, yeah, okay. 2, the parking placards or some sort of individual vehicle notifications to be
Displayed in the vehicle.
displayed in the vehicle. 3, the search and rescue compensation for participation in
In
Event
a,
event management. And 4, furnishing and continually updating an annual event calendar along with the annual report by February 15th of every year to the Office of Emergency Management.
Yep, I would just tie it to the annual review, that it's due.
and they can maybe provide that to us and OEM. Maybe just make that specific so it all goes to both places. That'd be great.
And I'm going to encourage them. We have, we have CJK that has to do an annual report. And so I've got some examples to show them. I would encourage them from the start to start maintaining that record right away so that they can bring in a very inclusive report every year that has all that information. But that upfront knowledge to OEM, and I think just, obviously, if they could do something kind of interactive and do like some kind of shared calendar with OEM, they just updated them when they updated things, that would be really great if they could find some kind of methodology that they could do something interactive.
Mhm. Okay, and then just some of your little formatting issues.
Yes, yes. Yeah, if
So
you
it's
want
all
to give me
the-
those, if you want to make a motion, I can do that. And bring it back up.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve file 22-41, a conditional use permit for a special event facility and a private resort at Mini Placer USMS 6971 Chalk Mountain Fremont Pass area at 6971 FS Road 134. Oh, with the conditions read into the record and the four additional conditions that we mentioned today.
A second?
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
None for me?
Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Sarah, can you email me your just your notes? real
Yeah,
quick, and
yeah.
I'll go downstairs and take those up.
Sure.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We also have one site revision this time, and then this back up here, so I try to submit
Okay.
those other.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, hold on.
No, you're good. I'm just making sure nobody's in the waiting room.
You pull up the next, you share the next agenda,
Yes, I can. Where is it?
under Chrome,
Huh?
under Chrome.
The holiday schedule.
In the,
The OCC room?
yeah, there's the shared folders in there.
Sure. I have to send you to get my sunglasses. My prescription. Okay, and this is the holiday schedule?
Right,
Yes.
two.
Right there. Cool. All right, and I will share this. Okay. All right, we're set.
All right, next on our agenda is consideration of the amendment to resolution 22-03 for our county holiday schedule. We have Ally Garvey from HR and yes, here to, sorry, it's like, and Tim, I don't know.
Whoever else wants to
And
talk.
your friends, and all your friends. Sorry, Ally, go ahead.
This will hopefully be pretty short and sweet. So currently we are at 12 county holidays. The proposed amendment will take us to 14. The two additional holidays will be the addition of Juneteenth, Monday, June 19th. It was not in 2022's holiday. I believe it was a Sunday last year. Going forward, maybe we do it as observed, but this year it is on a Monday. So we would add that to a regular holiday schedule. And this year, July 4th falls on a Tuesday. So we figured it might be in the employee's best interest, maybe in the county's best interest, considering several people will probably take that day off anyway, to just close county offices and recognize it as a holiday as well.
I don't have anything. I'm good with this. Thank you for the addition of Juneteenth. I think through our previous DEI training, we've tried really hard to be more inclusive with our holiday schedule. So this is reflective of that. And we do have the floating holiday for those that don't observe these holidays, that they're welcome to also observe the other holidays. So yeah.
28K.
Oh, yeah, 28K, but 6,000 of that comes from additional pay. If we think about how we budgeted, we're paying county employees anyway for that day, whether they work or not. The only additional cost would be people working on that holiday, sheriff's office, public works, if someone gets called out for something. We did talk with the sheriff about this, and he was all right on that extra.
Okay. So just a quick question. So I know that in particular, Public Works changes their schedule sometime around now when it's pretend spring. And so how would this affect them if their regularly scheduled day off is Memorial Day, that Monday, May 29th? How does that affect them? Do they get that holiday pay, or how does that
They would substitute it for a different day.
For a different day?
So if
Okay.
they normally work Tuesday through Friday, they would just take off a Tuesday instead and get paid that holiday pay on that day.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Great. I'll entertain a motion, for the amendment of resolution 22-03.
I'll make a motion that we amend resolution 22-03, the county holiday schedule.
Second?
Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
I do
Thanks.
have, something to sign, would you rather do that at the end of the meeting?
Sure, I
You
can do
can
it for
just,
you now.
yeah, you can just bring it here and we can get that recorded too. And then you can send that out.
I will do that.
Awesome, thanks, Ally.
Thanks.
Okay,
We're taking a very short break.
yeah.
Sure.
Vanessa, can we take 5 minutes and then we'll move to you? Okay,
Definitely.
thank you. Thanks. We'll be back at 1. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, 12:50, 12:50.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much. All right, it is 12:51. We are back and we're gonna jump into item number 5, a consideration of a resolution to create a separate fund for Get Outdoors Leadville. This will be led by our county manager, I believe, and we have Vanessa here, who is our Get Outdoors Leadville director. I think that what was shared with me is this fund is meant to help streamline finances with as big and complicated as the Get Outdoors Leadville funding layering is. Finances now that they are thank you, sure, yep. Sorry, this is a good streamlined way to make sure that that stays that way and ease of record keeping is maintained. Anything else to add there, Tim or Vanessa? I think it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the resolution number will be 2306.
Okay. (2306) to create. All right. Do we have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. I do not either.
Okay. I will make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Go
you're-
ahead.
It's just
Okay.
desperate to get that.
I know, go ahead, go ahead.
Let me move first. I move that we approve resolution 2306 to create a separate fund for Get Outdoors Leadville.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good luck
Vanessa.
with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, now item number 6, we got an overview of opportunities for community benefit and spending of Colorado Works temporary assistance to needy families funding, or TANF funding. And our Human Services Director, Janine McKee, is here, and this is meant to be a bit of a presentation, informative, since it kind of integrates into a lot of conversations we've been having, and also other ways that we've allocated this funding for the support of Bright Start, as an example, in the last few years. So
Yeah.
I will hand that over to you, Janine.
Yeah, so our opportunities for use of our TANF funds really exist beyond just basic cash assistance, which is what folks who are enrolled in the TANF program are eligible for on an income basis. Other funding uses really have a broad range. So it can be for a number of financial needs, and can also be for support of programming, a number of different uses related to youth, child welfare, prevention, child care. We have used $30,000 of our TANF reserves each year for the last 2 years to go to Bright Start. We would entertain other opportunities to support child care in that capacity if needed. So what we hope to do is launch our financial assistance program, which will include providing specific uses for these funds. I will mention also another area where we've used our TANF funds is in disaster response. So, for example, this last year we had 2 situations with house fires, both of which we could have utilized the disaster assistance fund through the community fund, but because they were families and they had a household income that met criteria, we've been able to use TANF funds to support those families with things like utility expenses or basic needs. And that's been another, I think important use. So anytime we have a family who has some of these needs and they meet income criteria, and by family we mean anybody with children under age 18, and they can be in the home some of the time or all of the time, and somebody in the home is lawfully present, and they make less than 75,000, it really broadens that use. The other thing that we can use it for is to meet community needs by partnerships or collaborations with other organizations, some of which can be emergency food needs, all kinds of programming, domestic violence programming, again, youth programming. We can use it for fatherhood programming. There's a number of priorities, but it's pretty broad in usage. So just want to remind the group that that is available. We hope to launch our financial assistance program here shortly with getting an application out. Renee joined us today. She's been working on a draft of the application. We can start taking referrals quickly. So the one thing is I'm monitoring across the state the availability of TANF funds. And I'll be participating on the 24th with the Works Allocation Committee. We have spent, across the state, we've spent more TANF money this year than in prior years. Part of that was due to legislation last year that increased the basic cash assistance amount. So across the state, we've spent $9 million more this year. So in reaching out to some of the counties that we've typically been able to purchase TANF funds from, they've spent theirs, and they're trending towards overspending. One of the other items on the agenda today is purchasing from Otero County. So I've been trying to find the folks that do have some TANF funds available and asking them. So I'll address that when we come to it, but that's part of our strategy. Again, we're looking at a state fiscal year, so we're looking at July 1 is the start of our year. So we may do some financial assistance for the remaining months this year, but we'll look at what's available for next year as well.
Okay. Excellent. Can you talk a little bit more about the programming that other communities use, or what is there a criteria for eligible programming?
Youth-centered, anything that focuses for youth on youth development, particularly at-risk youth. Also anything that serves our child welfare population, and then anything that falls in the category of prevention. So it's pretty broad, which is helpful.
But you just have to have at least one child, like 18 or under 18 sold. And household income threshold.
Yeah, so we could provide funding to the family directly for something. We can also provide funding for programming. So the summer day camp programming that we offer, that just a percentage of those families have to meet that criteria, and we've provided it for the entire community. We've also supplemented Rocky's Rock in past years. So there's opportunity to, if there's a prevention focus to it, which a lot of it, outdoor pro-social programming. But if we decided that in the community there was a real need for some other type of programming, that we can use some of this for our wraparound programming, that prevention work, anything that's prevention of further social harms, especially tied to child welfare, but also TANF funding also is very closely tied to out of wedlock pregnancies. So it's pretty broad. There's a lot of things. The other piece that is helpful to think of is anything that's associated with work supports. So for example, if providing programming for youth in the summer allows parents to be able to get to work because there's not summer childcare, that's a work support as well. But lots of things related to work supports could be education opportunities, could literally be tires on the car to get to the job, or training, or whatever that might be. If somebody could, somebody we work with says, I could get this job if I just had this, or now I've got got the job, but I need this certification or something like that.
So those are options.
Yeah, it could be work boots, it could be work, pretty much anything. It can also include related to programming. It could be paying for sports activities, equipment, band, like a number of different things that if those families meet that income threshold. Other counties have done things like bought backpacks for the school district and said distribute this to kids, or school supplies, or we've also used our TANF funding to purchase winter clothing and we've provided to the school. Hats, coats, gloves, snow pants, that they get out to the kiddos too.
And 30% of your TANF allocation can go towards childcare.
30% of our reserves are TANF reserves, which is $100,000 a year, and then we just have to make sure we replenish that the next year. And yeah, but 30% of that can go to childcare related. It's a pretty broad range in that too.
At Bright Start, we use it to pay for our director's salary, and like if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be open, and it's still not enough money to stay open. So, I mean, it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
The school district and the Head Start program is in a little different, I guess, like totally a different path than we are, right? Because we can use that money to subsidize our teachers, but now that the Head Start and Center teachers are part of the school district and they went through that process of, the raises and the being treated as certified staff, like we can't give them money for their staff specifically because they have to match the school district stuff. So for us at Bright Start, it's a little more fluid where we can take in grant funding and we can directly feed that into staff. And
there might be opportunity for other things, like it can be related to quality improvement.
Yeah.
So it could be for
their ratings,
toys, or if there was
classroom
curriculum or
supplies,
whatever, that it could go towards their quality rating, although they're already rated pretty well. But
yeah,
it's also to maintain your quality rating.
Yeah, if you have a Head Start program, you automatically get a rating of 4. Where we open and we don't get a rating at all until we're ready to have a review to get a rating.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, you could directly feed that into the classroom through curriculum or classroom supplies or whatever, yeah.
It could also be used for private providers if they needed things like curriculum, or it has to be, sort of tied to that quality rating, but every quality rating has really specific things. Like it could be things like the types of books or the types of toys, or if they're trying to reach, go from a 2 to a 3 or something like that, and they just need these things.
Like teacher coaching?
Yeah, coaching's a really, common use for that too.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities for that. The other thing I'd like to really expand upon, although it's not specifically TANF, is our CCAP. That is much more restricted, but what I'd like to do is dedicate more outreach in our community to include how to help people with CCAP applications, and actually have those folks tap into our CCAP dollars that are doing, when I say those folks, I mean our staff members doing outreach, be able to tap into some of the CCAP funds. And other counties have had CCAP navigators essentially. And it's application assistance is what it really is, but we're really underutilizing our CCAP funds.
And some of that comes back to your income verification and then your provider fee being more than our tuition at Bright Start. So if our tuition is $900 a month, your provider fee, once your CCAP application is processed, could come back at $1,000 a month. And you have to pay your provider fee before you can get the benefit. But if our tuition is lower than what you'd have to pay for that provider fee, then there's no point in utilizing the CCAP.
Yeah. It just ranges on what those, but having somebody help navigate some of that kind of thing, you could pay staff for doing that as well. Trying to utilize those underutilized dollars, and CCAP is one of those areas.
Yeah.
The CCAP fund, so there's 2 areas. TANF funds can be used for some CCAP-based activities, but the actual CCAP allocation can only be used for direct service or for our staff to help people access CCAP. And that's unfortunate because
There's a lot of money there.
there's a lot
And
that
I-
sits there.
I think that they were saying from CDHS at CCI at one point in time that no county really uses their full CCAP allocation.
Well, what tends to happen is either you use it or you don't. Like, if you don't have enough providers, it's very hard to use it. Some use it because they do have some of the providers and they'll overspend and they have wait lists, so they can buy it from each other. So you can buy CCAP dollars from each other too.
Like $10.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, but across the board, we tend to underspend because of lack of providers, especially in rural counties, we tend to underspend. Larger counties tend to overspend.
I had a question on, this is great, I had a question on housing, so are there any examples or limits on what kind of housing programs TANF dollars could be used to
It can pay for
support?
short-term, transitional, whatever is needed. I mean,
It's like
we
helping someone pull together the money for like
Yeah.
first, last month, it's a
deposit,
good
first,
deposit,
last,
like,
rent, yeah. What
Yeah,
really the limit there is what, we put on it around how much per household
yeah,
or what, what situation we have and how much we have to work with too. And my goal is to have more to work with, and we probably will this year, but again, we only have a few months left, so we'll finish out this year meeting some of those needs and then look at what the next year looks like.
and it would still be limited to, I mean, it has to be eligible households, right?
Yes.
See, so it can't be a more general program.
Right, it has to be the less than 75, but when you think about it, single parent households almost always
Yeah.
meet that criteria.
Yeah,
And the child doesn't have to be in the home full time, so it can be, a single parent household and kids are there some of the time. That meets the criteria too. But housing is also, the way the funding works for this is that it's also considered a work support, because if you don't have secure
Yeah.
housing, you're not able to work as
Yeah.
efficiently and effectively as well.
yeah. No, I just think of the complexity of administering a program if you have to understand that household.
Yeah, I mean, we'll try to keep it simple, so yeah, if somebody identifies, I don't have the deposit, I don't have, the first couple months rent, but the benefit is that we'll have a case manager who will help look at the whole plan too, so what's the long-term plan? And really, it can also be used to keep somebody in their home too.
Could we potentially use TANF dollars as a county contribution to the housing authority to run a program as long as that program is eligible? Wow, okay.
TANF dollars have been used for transitional housing in
Yeah.
other counties. We don't have a lot. So like the places it's been used for transitional housing is where they have $20 million in their TANF allocation every year, right? So that's where you could
Yeah.
use something big.
And can dedicate, I was thinking with your, our 100,000 and then depending on purchasing, I was like, okay, different framework of making sure if we're supporting
Yeah.
something or meaning to in some long-term plan,
Right.
we need to
Right.
consider what
And the
levels.
challenge of the plan is if your plan is hedging on that buying process, and this year, there's not as much. I am
Right.
gonna be paying attention to it, because the reason the legislation was passed last year to increase basic cash assistance is because we have a huge chunk of TANF long-term reserve at the state level that they've been trying to find use for. So I'm interested to find out if somehow that's gonna be trickling down to counties, as counties are now spending all of these TANF dollars. How is the long-term reserve going to come into play?
Okay.
So I think we should continue to have visions for it, but we have about, our TANF allocation is about 219,000 this year. We have a reserve of 100, but you can only touch 30% of your 100 specifically for childcare. The only other reason you can touch your reserve is if you go over, like you're overspent, they'll spend out of your reserve, or if there's a disaster.
Okay.
So you, as we discussed in our housing authority meetings and developing other priorities and programming, I'll suggest that Jackie reach out to you.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I
understand.
just think we have to see what that looks like, and it could be something like, you know, there's a certain amount, or that we always have funding to be able to pay for, you know, the way we would pay for any commercial piece of property, we would be able to commit to paying for a chunk of rent for families, or we could permanently assist and fix
Well,
it.
even, like, could we do like a recruitment program? Because we've been talking about losing our mutual aid agreements with folks for temporary housing. And could we think of something like spending those dollars on eligible employees to maybe have some longer, short-term housing? And we can kind of build back that trust with those lodgers so that then other emergent and folks in crisis, we can reestablish.
Sure,
the
sure, and I think anytime you're doing it,
engagement.
you just have to have like the participation of the family as well. So while we could do it for employees, they're also saying yes, and it's simple participation, they sign a form that says, yes, I make less than 75,000 and we have kiddos and that kind of thing.
Right.
And it doesn't get tracked anywhere else other than that form.
Mhm.
That is for audit purposes to show that that's what that funding went for. So they're not, the benefit is they're not in a database really. And we've talked about how we do this financial assistance program, what kind of record keeping do we keep? But for some folks, it's important to feel like, okay, this is just some assistance. I'm not going on government benefits forever or whatever that looks like. But yeah, certainly I think that's a great place to start. I mean, Ally has worked actually in other areas where we can provide assistance to county employees, which is TANF, but it's also other areas. We have behavioral health funding as well. So at the very least, we should be getting the word out to our own staff who could qualify for that. Yeah.
What about, I think, again, in like other conversations, the DEI training and the trauma-informed training and trying to like trickle that down and training the trainers of especially youth coaches or goal staff or Rocky's Rock. We could potentially support the expansion of something like that.
Yeah, especially if it's, you know, connected to youth development, youth programming, prevention of, you know, which any kind of leadership training, work supports for youth are all, yeah, in that realm.
I wonder, sorry,
No, go ahead.
having CSU Extension and in particular Mark's expertise in healthy relationship ships. Yeah, I wonder if there's any example. Do you know of any examples of
There can
human
be
service
all
departments
kinds of, yeah, there,
partnering
I mean,
with
some of them
CSU
partner
Extension?
with domestic violence programs, fatherhood programs are a really big one as well. Again, those are typically done in counties that have really big allocations in the millions of dollars where they can permanently fund an entire program.
Yeah.
Like, it could be part of, and it depends on your population. If we have a lot of folks on TANF, and our TANF caseload ranges between 7 and 12 typically, but if you're a county where you have 500 people receiving cash assistance, the basic cash assistance, they're required to do some activities and work activities. So fatherhood programming is like sometimes a great thing. But TANF allocation in many counties fund entire agencies. Like it's their primary source of funding.
Well, and I haven't checked back in with probation at all either, but do you coordinate any of that with probation currently, or is there potential? Because I know they were like, oh, we could add 7 staff if we had the space to do it and offer
Right.
programming. Well, if we're all
So
talking about the same
probation, I
thing.
believe, tends to run, you know, I think that's a good conversation we could have. They might do some of their own internal programming. I know for youth, they tend to refer a lot to RAP so that they get that, that whole approach too. So they may have programming. I mean, there's all kinds of evidence-based programming that, you know, if it's determined that that's what youth need or that could be beneficial. If it's prevention focused.
Yeah.
And prevention of most things. I think the challenge right now, again, I'm just gonna watch this funding and see how we're gonna get some of this big chunk of state long-term reserve and what that's gonna look like. So those are the options. We'll look to launch that here, have an application out in the next couple of weeks. And we're trying to come up with a catchy name for the financial assistance program.
And reiterate what, how you intend to, who you intend to serve for what
To let,
purposes
no,
for
that, just to essentially get out the word. I think what we'll start with is referrals from community agencies, especially for overflow of like their folks. And if they have a need and they can see a need, we'll start taking referrals from, for financial assistance in all these different categories. I don't know that originally the goal was to promote it a lot and let people like general advertising. I don't know if we'll have the funding to do that before July, so we'll just see what we have available, but we can start taking referrals.
Okay. Cool, excellent.
Thanks, Janine.
Sounds like a lot of conversations to coordinate, push people your way.
Yeah. I wish we had the millions and millions that the big counties do, but right now they don't either, so it's really interesting. Let's see.
And, well, yeah, I don't know. Just gonna ask a question about the mechanics of the state spending 9 million more than typical and yet the reserve, but you have yet to see
I have yet to
how
figure that out,
will
what
play
that
out.
will look like.
Yeah.
We should know once we get closer to the close of the state's fiscal year.
It's already overspent.
Okay.
Like, we're at 66, the end of February, we were at 66% of the year, and TAMF is 69% spent.
Okay.
So I know the plan is to tap into those reserves. I just haven't stayed abreast of what that's actually
What that
gonna
looks
look like, or how that's gonna get to counties. And it could be through overspending. So it could be that it's like, hey, go overspend, and these long-term reserves will mitigate
Replenish
everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
The reserve that we have, you said 30% is eligible for the childcare, and then we kind of keep that in reserve for emergency.
We do, but it's
purposes.
also to, if we overspend in child welfare, TANF or CCAP, that reserve is used first in our overspending,
Okay,
and then across the state, underspent mitigates, which is.
emergencies or whatever
Yeah,
else
but
we
it
may
can
have
also be
to.
used for officially declared disasters, and that's when we used it during COVID. We used all of our 100 within the first 3 months of lockdown, 3 or 4 months of lockdown, and then we convinced the state to replenish that in any county where our reserves were spent, and they did determine to replenish. So we used it, and then we got it filled back up.
Alright. Thanks. Exciting.
Yeah.
Alright.
So that's that doesn't need any action.
Alrighty, thank you for
Yeah.
that information. And then number 8, then, as you alluded, oh no,
I think Russ said
Seven.
it, yeah.
discussion of the consideration of purchasing Otero County Colorado Works funding, $60,000.
Yeah, so Otero is underspent right now, and they have agreed to sell the 60,000. It's as simple as we write a letter, you'll just need your signature, and then we submit it to the state, and then the state just transfers the money, but the letter goes to their commissioners and to you all.
What's the ratio of the actual purchase? Like to the
The
value
MOE,
of the, no, the value of the, we buy,
yeah,
are we spending 60 for what
we
amount?
get
Are we
60,
We get
and we
60,
pay the MOE, which is about 15%, yeah. It's about 15 cents, yeah.
On the dollar?
Yeah, well, roughly, yeah.
Okay.
But we did the MOE relief, we chose the MOE relief, so we didn't pay our MOE this year. So we pay, which actually benefits us because that would have been more than the MOE that we'll pay on the 60. I'm still looking for more to purchase though, too. Route County has a little bit, so I'm gonna see what goes.
Okay.
But Yeah, so that goes hand in hand. It doesn't, you just have to be aware of it,
Okay.
the purchase, but
So do we have to formally vote
Yeah.
to decide on the purchase? Okay.
Let's.
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
Sure. So I will make a motion that we approve purchasing TANF dollars from Otero County, Colorado, and authorize our Human Services Director to draft that letter for the purchase.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Well, thank you.
No, no.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Right. Thanks very much, Janine. And on to number 8, consideration of funding request in the amount of $50,000 for St. George's, and this was from a past discussion on ARPA dollars. I think given Janine's presentation, and I think we were talking about potentially looking into what that, any TANF dollars put towards the food pantry would look like. I definitely would be interested in continuing to coordinate that with St. George's. Any other, I mean, I know there's other comments or questions from fellow commissioners?
No, just that we can use those TANF dollars to supplement that request from, and that we have enough TANF dollars to supplement that request.
that, again, I just have to figure out what's gonna happen exactly. So I'm still trying to research, like, is everybody gonna get more or less somehow? Again, and when we start the fiscal year on July 1, so we'll have a new block available at that time too. So I'll give you more information as soon as I have it on what the actual figures look like. But they can be used for that purpose.
And I don't know if that looks like 50, I mean, the original request was 50,000 of ARPA, and then getting into these conversations with TANF, I don't even know if that is 50,000.
I don't know that I would recommend
or-
50 this fiscal year.
That's-
We could probably do something. But again, I just want to make sure that I get a good sense of what our strategy is at
Yeah.
at that high level too.
Yeah, because TANF is so fluid, it's not like, okay.
Yeah. And I know there's gotta be a plan for those bigger TANF dollars, so I just have to understand that a little bit better myself. And then, but it can be used for that. I don't think, the requirement, so Jeff had asked a question before about how folks could use it, and then I mentioned that we can give it to agencies, but it does require a contract. So you do have to contract. They have to have at least some percentage of the participants fill out the affidavit form. So it doesn't have to be the whole amount, but some folks that they serve, you have to be able to document they meet this criteria. Again, it's a really simple one-page form. And, we've used it for the summer camp. Nobody had any trouble or concern with completing it. And it doesn't have to be everybody, it just has to be, some. And so it could be that the families that you work with are the ones that end up filling out those forms, but that is specified in the contract. And then data, if you all want other data, like how many total people are served or what does that look like, that can be specified in the contract. And some of it's a standard contract, depends on what you're contracting for.
So given that information, with the request from St. George, I would feel comfortable giving that money out of our general fund and then working with St. George's to develop a sustainability plan and what that looks like going forward. We're working to understand what our TANF allocation will be and what we can do in the future with that. The only thing is I just would not want to take from that TANF allocation and then not have enough money or not have it replenished if there are families that need it outside of the food pantry.
With existing programs or demands and needs.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because TANF is one of those areas that counties have been able to really do what they know works in their community and have that flexibility. So with that increase in basic cash assistance that they pushed for, it took away some of that, like, hey, you now have opportunity to do this. I mean, it's a good thing because it gives more money to all the folks that need that cash assistance, but, so, yeah, the other thing is the TANF contract is year to year, so it could be, for 1 year and see how it goes and see what funding is available each time. We are referring a lot of folks to the food pantry, especially for our homeless and wraparound families. It's been a really big need. So definitely, in terms, and the TANF funding really should be used for the big needs that are showing up in the community, so.
Yeah, I mean, and with St. George's collecting data, I mean, we should be able to work on that going forward. And the state fiscal year starts in July, so, I mean, if we did something out of our general fund now, we were to set some guidance in place with St. George's on TANF dollars, and then we could allocate that in our budget cycle for 24. So we can do some of that background work now.
I like the idea of the strategic planning. We actually required that when we did Bright Start, the first contract, is that we wanted our board to do some strategic planning. I think that's helpful.
And we completed our latest one last month, so. And we do give that to, we do fill out the state reporting requirement for that as well.
So yeah, I just think, if there's things that we want to include in the contract. The other thing is,
How quickly could we get that looked at, and would we definitely be suggesting that that's like for the next fiscal year?
I could tell you by the end of March what we're looking like for this fiscal year, in the last quarter of this fiscal year. And there could be funding. I just don't want to put us in a position and overstretch ourselves. But I can let you know what that looks like, for sure. Because the Works Allocation Committee meeting is on the 24th. But I reached out to a few folks before then to get a good sense of it. So I would say by the end of March, I can make a recommendation as to if we could do something in this fiscal year and what amount that would be. And then that would also affect next fiscal year too, because however this process is going to work going forward.
It will affect the formula. Yeah. Because the state and DHS fiscal year ends June 30th.
Yeah, and whatever they're going to be doing to tap those long-term reserves, I assume will be a long-term plan, so it would work for following years.
The sample contract that you sent to us at some point a few weeks ago, is that something that?
Yeah, I think that's what was an Adams County one. We also do a contract like with the 100 Elk program for summer day camp. It could be something similar to that. It's just a standard.
Just services, yeah, and so I think we can handle it just as a services agreement and just whatever scope of work or conditions that you want to put into what would be the exhibit A to go with the contract.
Okay.
And the benefit is, like the one that we did with 100 Elk, it talks about how their programming is tied to the TANF outcomes that they're, so it's
right,
pro-social and all of that kind of thing. So we can incorporate that as well. And whatever else you want. I mean, you can add, whatever outcomes or whatever you want in there.
Certainly be good to be looking at perhaps doing that to start for the fourth quarter, getting something from them before the end of March, so we can tee that up for the first meeting in April. Or April, I was gonna say, for whatever the next meeting would be, if you want to do it for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
When do you think you'll have, if you said you
I'll know by the end of March. I'm hoping
April, that's why I got confused. I was like, March.
Well, and I'm
When do you
thinking
get your
quarter of my
reports?
fiscal, of our state fiscal,
So
so,
that's
yeah, and we
March
are in the
31st.
fourth quarter.
Yeah, so
quarter
you're
already, but, I feel comfortable saying the end of March. I hope to have more information sooner than that. But it could take speaking up at the Works Allocation Committee. I can't imagine that other counties haven't mentioned things before, but I haven't been participating, so I'll just have to get a sense of what that looks like. But the contract itself, I don't know if we want to do a contract without knowing the dollar amount,
Yeah.
like
No,
knowing
that's,
that
oh,
that's
no,
for
okay,
sure.
yeah, you want to
So,
do that.
but the draft, I think you could think about what you would like, you know, to include. And then there can be some negotiation. It's the first time we went with Bright Start, we negotiated a little bit too. So,
So we'll work on that, and April, after your April 24th meeting,
March 24th. Oh,
We
sorry,
did
April
April.
25th. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I said the end of March. Sorry.
That's why I'm
Not
like,
get it.
I thought maybe you were gonna be getting the numbers for March, and that's what you were. working
No,
on.
I will be participating in the next meeting, and then I will be able to get back. Yeah. I'll get you, give me like 3 weeks to give you some final answers on this.
So that's what I was
fiscal
thinking,
year.
that's what I thought were the numbers for that, and then we tee it up for the first meeting. in
Yes.
May then.
May
For this-
or a second or June, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we need to figure out what that looks like and then
Yeah.
share that with St. George and see if they want to
Right,
participate.
what the contract
Yeah.
looks like, so.
For this funding request.
No, for moving
Subsequent.
forward.
Funding.
Yeah.
Okay. So for this funding request then, do we feel comfortable moving forward with that?
So I mean, I liked your idea of authorizing out of general fund, and then we can revisit some of these questions that we don't know the answers to, if we want or the funding source down the road, but just give St. George the certainty now.
I would just suggest that you do your motion to take it out of the board's contingency fund,
Okay.
so St. George doesn't have to wait for me to do a supplemental budget.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, so I will make a motion that we approve the funding request for $50,000 for St. George's to come out of the county commissioner's contingency fund for this request, and then we'll look further for our additional $10,000.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion?
No, thank you. Thanks for so much info.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jean. And on to number 9, consideration of the purchase order in the amount of $10,000 for energy assistance programming with Cloud City Conservation Center. And we have Emily Olson here. Who is leading this one?
I think Emily, just provide an overview of the program and the request, and then.
Yeah, so,
However you wanna-
is the zero waste one, do we need to do anything for that?
No, that one is approved, and that was a miscommunication between Chris and I, because we were gonna put both in there.
In the same,
in the
yeah, I thought it was the
purchase
same
order,
one.
But, so that one's done.
Just great,
Just
since that's the
energies,
time
yeah.
sensitive one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think going back and forth with Tim about our energy program, which has so many different aspects, we realized that, you know, we've made a lot of changes over the last few years. And I think a lot of what was proposed in the contract with the county, we actually already have a contract with Energy Outreach Colorado to do that for the entire county. If the commissioners want to duplicate it, we can, but ultimately those funds go to support our rebate program, which you've supported since its inception in 2013. So I made this document, which we're in the process of sharing throughout the entire county, which is everything that the, Janine, I'm emailing it to your staff, but I'm happy to give you one. This is a list of everything that our energy program does. This purchase order is for our rebate program again, which is because the city matched funds is only about $10,000, I would say the total of this, when you add in kind and what our partners are supporting, is well over $200,000 or $300,000 of work.
So, sorry, what is do you have a proposal for
So I
amending
think
or
I'm
not?
just curious about any clarification. So there's a piece in the current purchase order around C4 leading some sort of community-wide collaboration on energy specifically. And I'm really curious as to what that means specifically to you all, because that can be so broad. We are, we're leading as Partners in Energy, Lake County Energy Plan. We have tried to stay away from starting any more committees or coalitions. And I would actually say I don't think we need one specific to energy. I think it falls within housing pretty clearly. And we've already committed to taking on a lot of the energy action plan once it's finalized. So there isn't anything going in that plan that doesn't already have a stakeholder committed to implementing it.
Right.
And so I guess I'm happy to keep the collaboration aspect as long as there's some clarification from the commissioners as to what that means to you and how we can actually achieve that item.
In this specific scope of services, right, where it says lead collaboration and communication on energy assistance programs with various local stakeholders, including but not limited to, DHS, Public Health, Senior Center, Veteran Services, Elks, Eagles, XL, Full Circle, Advocates, Lake County Regional Housing Authority to help Lake County residents address energy assistance needs. That's the one that you have concerns on, correct?
Yeah, that's the most recent one that I've seen.
Okay.
I think, go ahead.
Well, I think maybe I misunderstood your question, but I think that collaboration was around the energy assistance, and I mean, this table itself is like a good start. Because I think that's exactly it. It's like there's so many different programs, there's so many different entities in different parts of the space that just sort of.
So there's no, to be clear, there's no specific energy assistance beyond what's on that table. I didn't list like some of the funds like ELKS or CSBG that you can access through public health because those can be used for other things. It's not utility specific, and we do refer clients to that, but only when we've already exhausted like everything on our end to help them.
Right.
So I kind of read this as like collaboration in terms of like making this available or reaching out to the senior center or the veterans in particular to make sure that those folks that utilize those services have a copy of this that may not cross with other agencies for any kind of assistance. Like they may not go to DHS, but may need help with, I don't know, a home energy audit or improvement or something like that. But just to make sure that those agencies are aware of the services that you provide is kind of how I read that. But if we need to reword that, I don't think that that's a huge issue if that is, just to make that a little more clear.
Yeah, I think that was basically the gist of it for me too, and like a reoccurring conversation or knowing that like, yes, 12 of the folks that Harry serves understand and have either accepted or denied. I think it's enough to be able to capture who, like the numbers of who are being served by other agencies like that.
So that's something that we don't track, like what other programs our participants utilize or who they're coming through. I think like we also have to acknowledge that people have the choice of what they choose to take advantage of, and we've done the best that we can to remove as many barriers to our programs whenever possible. And we do like reach out to all of these partners. We inform them of our programs, but then it really is on our partners to decide like how they want to inform their clients, and that's something that like I can't take responsibility for.
No, I don't think, no, I wouldn't have asked you to communicate with their clients, just with the program directors or administrators, and making sure that, I mean, it takes time to digest and be reminded, and I think that sort of like regular cadence would be great. And that's what I had understood that bullet point would request.
So for our energy outreach contract, and it's fine if it overlaps, We essentially just have to provide like meeting minutes that we met with these partners. And so I'm happy to do that for you all as well. That's
Okay.
Great, cool. Do your question.
That works for me.
Okay.
Thanks, Emily.
Sounds good. Do you have any other questions for me, or?
I don't think so.
We do need to approve the purchase order.
Well, I was gonna say,
Yes.
that's what I wanted more, just clarification as to, what the components of this will be.
I don't think we have to change it, as long as there's clarification on what that
Yeah.
communication means.
I think we're good.
Do you have it?
I was gonna say, I know, because I'm looking for.
You should
the
have it.
additional- I have the description that Emily gave. Such, but,
It's in the packet, but if you want to run it
oh, I'll look
down,
at it, yeah. If it's in-
because I don't know what the energy outreach contracts is, but if you want to say like county stakeholders, so we don't list everybody,
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
make that change.
Okay.
Is the, energy cost?
Yep.
Okay.
No,
No, okay.
Okay.
sorry.
Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
We can catch up on, I
Do we
think
need to
they,
give you
I
a
don't
minute?
think they need, no.
Well, I just want to make sure I have the information you need to put into, because I need to create the agreement for this one, because we didn't combine it with the other zero waste one. I thought we were just gonna add that to have these both in the same one, but that one's already done.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I have the right information.
Okay, so, I will make a motion that we approve the purchase order in the amount of $10,000 for energy assistance programming with Cloud City Conservation Center. Once it's had its final
That's what I was gonna say.
compilation by legal and county manager.
A second? All right, any further discussion?
Well, thank you.
I'm good.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks for your
Emily.
patience.
Okay,
All right, and item number 10, discussion and consideration of the behavioral health administrative organizations map and what administrative organization Lake County should be in. This is led by Janine, and this is spurred by state,
We both the map.
yes. Is it in the BOCC?
Yeah.
sorry, the state looking at redrawing service areas. Janine can go into a little more detail of the complexities of what that might mean for us and recommendations based on conversations with Solvista and others.
So the newly formed Behavioral Health Administration, established by Governor Polis, has evaluated service and funding models, and the way that it works currently is that we have administrative service organizations and managed service organizations, which oversee the delivery of behavioral health services, particularly the providers. And just to remember that this is in the private realm, so this is not Medicaid or Medicare funded behavioral health services, but private realm, but it's still connected, it's still related in the structure. So what the Behavioral Health Administration is proposing is a different regional structure that will combine both the administrative service organizations and the managed service organizations into a behavioral health administrative service organization structure. So essentially they merge together, and it also combines the indigent care, which is CMHC component of that, into one structure that will be managed by one entity per region. instead of having those 3 different functions by potentially different entities. So in that structure, which would then be called the BAHASO, the Behavioral Health Administrative Service Organization, they would be looking at these 3 regions with a vendor who would put an RFP out, answer the RFP to administer the services in these 3 regions. The issue that came up is that Lake Park and Elbert were offered opportunities to decide which region they wanted to be in. Did we want to go with the blue region, or do we want to stay with the orange region? And then I was notified by our behavioral health service provider, Solvista, that if we choose to go with a different region than the region that we're in now, which is the orange, it could have significant impact on their ability to deliver services in Lake County. For a number of reasons. So given that information, I highly recommend that as staff that we stay in the same region that we're in, which is the orange region. We don't know for sure, who will get the RFP for, or the contract for managing those behavioral health services, but we need to be in that same geographical group. It does connect to the public funded behavioral health services in that the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing will be restructuring their RAY regions in 24? Okay, in another year, and likely they will follow the same region structure.
If you need it.
Wait, what? Say that again?
So, but if they do, if we don't think now about what that region structure looks like, we could end up in a region that our publicly funded behavioral health program wouldn't be able to serve. So that is the other reason I would recommend that we stay within our current region. The Behavioral Health Administration will say, they're 2 separate things, they don't have anything to do with each other, but we hear from HICPUF and other staff and other folks that they're gonna follow the same structure, so we don't wanna be caught off guard and not be in the right place. So my recommendation is that you all voice to CCI and to the Behavioral Health Administration staff that we would like to stay in the same region, and literally you need to say the orange region.
Because they don't know the names of those regions either, like they don't know those names.
They might look at a
There's no
different
colors.
map when we say we wanna stay in the same.
I mean, that's what our conversation was, the orange, I keep thinking orange sherbet is what it looks like, but we need to stay in that region.
Okay,
Apparently Dr. Medlock is gonna be making a decision very soon.
okay,
I am going to attend CCI on Friday, the 14th. I'll be there in person for the human services portion of the agenda, which I know this will be brought up. We are not behind because apparently this was just brought to the attention a little over a week ago in CCI.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, there was a lot of thought given to the impact of what this would be. Fortunately, our behavioral health provider in our community let us know that it
I
would
thought it was a pretty big deal. And I met with you and Brian last week, so I know,
Yeah.
and I feel pretty comfortable with saying orange, so.
be acronymed to pieces.
Yeah.
Don't remember any of those. No.
I would be, I don't know if it matters to anybody, I would be happy to send this to Ginny, or you can give it to her, or whatever whatever.
Is that the response needed to CCI or to?
Yeah,
I think
because
CCI and then
CCI
Megan,
will communicate that directly to.
yeah, I think that will be fine.
Jenny sent you guys an email last week.
Yeah, I responded to her.
On it, so I think you should do a formal letter.
To Jenny?
And then send it back to that whole group,
Okay,
because that has HICPO staff on it as well, which will imply to them that we want to stay in this region for future grade work.
okay.
And I'd say
That's
that
good.
obviously like both human services and public health, like fully aware, fully agree.
Excellent.
As well.
Yeah.
To say like, oh, what are you saying, what do you?
Yeah.
So thank you for clarifying that, because that's kind of where my questions were.
Yeah.
So.
This is maybe like in the weeds, and sorry for not like
It's okay.
getting to it before, but like, these are huge regions.
Mhm.
Like, holy cow.
There was some talk or
There was gonna
about,
be two.
and there was some talk
Okay.
about like opioid regions, which like we're not in the same region for opioids either. So we're in region 5.
Yeah.
Which those smaller regions may or may not be more manageable, but then this was what they decided on.
Yeah.
I will say the Larimer, Weld, and Broomfield folks are not pleased with being, I'll put in with the western slope, because they feel like they have, of course, much more in common with, Denver
Those
metro
eastern,
area.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I mean, to your point, the most populated counties are not in the orange. I mean, it's gonna be, some of the least populated, but I am just, again, I have not stayed on top of the work of the BHA and don't have a sense of where this is coming. They kept saying it was more equitable for equity purposes and for equity of funding. So I do not know exactly what that means.
I've been kind of secretive on it, because they didn't really provide us the data on that of what it meant either.
How many regions exist now?
So,
Well, there
I can't
multiple.
remember.
yeah,
That's-
depends
It's
on
different.
what state agency you're working with. So HICPUP has 7 regions, but HICPUP also has a leg in behavioral health. And
Right.
then there's the Behavioral Health Administration, which is this, and then there's Department of Human Services, which also has a leg in behavioral health. None of those cabinet members gave up any of their authority to deliver behavioral health in Colorado. So now Janine and Colleen get to deal with now 3 state agencies to be able to deliver these services to our community.
And different regions for all of them.
Yeah, and then the
Okay.
Division of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Insurance.
That is, no, I think that is,
The Division of Insurance divides the state into 9 different regions, which is your geographic area, which impacts the cost of your premiums. So,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can't get it aligned.
yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
will the
Well, we face-
insurance
yeah.
piece fall into this?
I highly doubt that DOI will follow this.
Yeah.
Because it's really much more based on your geographic region and then your population and then your health statistics on how your premiums are calculated, but they could. So you'll see the
That'd be
increase
neat.
again.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, we face this in like every board and thing we're a part of, like, you can't quite get the regions ever right.
Perfectly right.
The actual mapping seems great, and then Brian explaining the logistics and all of those. I mean, seeing how this will actually play out will be
Interesting.
very interesting to hear through your interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
layman's terms for us.
Well, it's has multiple complications. And the thing is, there's multiple, divide it into a region and then you put out RFPs, you don't know who the vendors are gonna be. You can kind of surmise that they're gonna be the same vendors that are doing the public health contracts, for HICPUP with the raise, maybe, you don't know. But if that is the case, then that will have its own implications. I mean, Solvista was also worried that, like, the large blue region could parcel out different sections and say, okay, maybe the whole blue region gets one contract, but within that, they sub out, Lake, Summit, Eagle, Grand, and, and then we get lumped together, and then they're gonna look for a behavioral health provider to serve those 5 counties. And so this is not gonna be able to do that. So he's also thought, they thought ahead enough to be like, that could also be problematic too. So keeping with the structure that we have is important.
And also, I think it's still, BHA is allowing for 2 providers to bid on these, so 2, or 1 company could control 2 regions. So just keep that in mind if,
Like somebody controls the orange and the blue.
right. So who currently controls the blue is Rocky, AKA United Healthcare. So,
And the.
It still could be
orange is
challenging, whether they
Oh, it will
award,
be- it'll
because
be
that
very
was
challenging
Brian's
to get the
concern with certain providers
Yeah,
or not.
Yeah.
And so that'll be the next, maybe, debate or conversation.
And I do think it's a good conversation. The conversation is, how important is it to have a local in-person behavioral health provider versus a large commercial telehealth-based behavioral health provider?
Right.
Which is, the cost to scale for telehealth is much cheaper than an in-person office in your local community, but that looks different in different communities, so that's also sort of what's at stake to some degree.
Okay. Sounds like we are in
Need to vote
agreement
for the
for
orange.
everybody to vote for the orange, and, I'll entertain a motion to, take the recommendation from VHS and Public Health to remain in the orange for our BHA, SO,
BHASO, yeah.
Bahasa.
and, draft a letter to CCI in the group and respond to that, email indicating our preference.
So moved?
Second,
Nice. Okay. Any further discussion?
No, none for me, thank you.
Who, you, Tim,
Yeah, I can,
Kayla,
yeah, I can do that.
got that?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can help with that.
you want
Sure.
to do that? Great. All right. All right, any further discussion?
Nothing?
All right, hearing none, yes?
The next thing.
Oh, yeah, we're good.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So the next two contracts are public health specific. Would it be possible to do build generation first? Because Noah actually has a meeting that's starting in a few minutes.
Sure.
That'd be great. And so I would ask that number 13 go to number 11 and then.
All right, so we will move to number 13 and come back to number 11.
That'd be great, thank you.
You bet. 13 is consideration of proposal from Lake County Building Generation to assist Lake County Public Health with the community health needs assessment and public health improvement plan. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Take it
thank you
away.
so much. So we had been working with Chris on this contract. And so when we had put together the proposal with it, I know that there's some language pieces that weren't quite clarified. So I want to make sure that he would clarify them. Do we need to change any of that language to make sure that we understand what that need is? So with our community health needs assessment, it's something that we are required to do every 5 years per the Public Health Act. In 2008, I had done a presentation to the Board of Health, folks in front of the room, in February around that. And in 2017, we had aligned with St. Vincent Health because they also have to do a community health assessment. And they are required to do it every 3 years. And we made the decision that we are going to align our timeline to do it every 3 years in conjunction with St. Vincent Health, that has now been recognized by the CDPHE as best practice. They're asking for a lot of public health agencies, especially in some of the smaller areas where people feel over-surveyed, or you're talking to the same people. It's not this big, huge, metro area where, you can keep it separate. And so currently we are considered best practice in what we do by aligning with the hospital and their timeline. So we had aligned in 2017, we aligned in 2020, and we are looking to align once again in 2023. We have utilized Lake County Build Generation since we started our first health assessment, which was in 2012. So this contract is specifically for Lake County Public Health Agency contracting with LCBAC for the work that they do. Basically, they drive that whole assessment piece for us, and do the data collection, and then the dissemination, and the focus groups, and the community organizing. And I can scroll down to all the other pieces that are already in here. And I think there was some confusion around the language of partnering with St. Vincent Health. And I think it was just more of, hey, recognize that this document that comes out in the end has all of my needs met for public health. It has all of St. Vincent's Health needs met as well, and for their assessment pieces. So I think that's the piece that might have sounded confusing. We are not
like doing this health assessment for St. Vincent Health, we do it in conjunction, just like we've done in 17 and 2020, and now again in 2023. And so that is where we're at. And so obviously, when you look at some of the deliverables, obviously it's community survey, community connector model to facilitate administration, collecting data from secondary sources. So if you go back into our health and happiness plan, you can see where we grab all of those data sources. And so once again, when we talked about the community health assessment, it really focused on social determinants of health, and those ones that had come to the forefront, as you guys remember, are housing, childcare, and affordable wage. The thing to remember is that when those do come to the forefront, that doesn't mean public health is responsible for everything that comes out of this assessment in the county. It truly is that stakeholder piece of who can do what, who has the capacity. So sometimes there are some things that rise to the top that no one has the capacity, and it's noted, and doesn't necessarily drive, like, I have to pivot all of the work that we do in public health, if that makes sense. But it is the opportunity to connect with the community and see what we're doing. And that also doesn't mean that any of the other pieces that we are working on go away. Like, access to care continues to be, something that we recognize, and we update all of the data around that. And basically, it allows us to do that. And so these guys write the assessment and our improvement plan, the evaluation plan, and then obviously supporting our local boards and adapting the public health improvement plan to the fifth. Because, we like all of those, names and all those acronyms. So I think the question was around the wording of the fact that we had put in there, part of that proposal is in partnership with St. Vincent Health. Like, we're not, like, that's just wording, not like we are paying for St. Vincent Health's assessment, if that makes sense. And if we have to change anything, that's kind of what we're here, but like to have that so that we've already ready to like kind of push out the survey to get this rolling, because we'd like to have it completed by the end of September to kind of coincide with the community dinner that happens every September with the Lake County Community Fund, to be like, hey, this is where we can present everything and have like our own little opportunity there. So that is where we're at. Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, go quick, because
Yeah.
I've got lots on it too in terms of the wording of the proposal.
Yeah, and that's what I said, because I had met with Tim and we wanted like, hey, do we need to wordsmith it? We thought it'd be easier to do it all together.
Sure.
With Noah here as well, to be like, hey, do we just want to be like, pull this all out and it just says this is what they're doing for public health? And that makes sense, but knowing that it is, a community process with our stakeholders, including St. Vincent Health.
I think my questions were less about the proposal itself and more about like needing the conversation or wanting to get into the deep dive with public health as the BOCC or the Board of Health of the progress and of some of the information and or reporting of the assessment itself. So I would love to do that before making a decision on engagement.
In the sense of like, so we're required to do that, we'd like to get it rolling. You want to know some of the background from, like we have a Board of Health meeting scheduled for May, like to bring in, would that be helpful to bring in then? I guess my point is like, I'd like to get our survey rolling while we go behind the scenes to talk about some of the other pieces, or what would have to change in this contract, I guess, would be my question.
Well, I think I have some concerns with the actual report and then like tracking with public health's strategic planning development. And I think the original flag was with like doing it with St. Vincent's. Yes, we know we've done that, but we both were kind of like, okay, if public health is rethinking and also looking at the next strategic plan, do we need something different out of this? And surely St. Vincent's might need something different, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I do think that it's worth like the conversation to go through the report and your development.
You mean the Happiness Project,
Yep.
like the final report?
Yes.
That's been out for 3 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, no, exactly though. Like we haven't ever talked through it, and
I would disagree in the sense of, it was adopted and I think my piece is that when we look at plans, so much of it actually isn't public health work in the county public health agency. Like, we're not obligated to do any of the findings. Like, something comes up, it's like, oh, that's what the community wants, and so it becomes part of the whole community and stakeholders. And not to say, like, I think the county has done a lot of work in those pieces, not with public health you know, specifically, right? It's not like, oh, public health, we wanted you to do X. It's like, hey, we're participating in some of these pieces, and even gotten, like, you know, some of the pieces that I'd shared in the Board of Health meeting, like, hey, we now have, you know, a housing authority, things like that, that were separate. Like, it wasn't like I was a part of that, you know, those pieces or those meetings to be like, this is what has to happen, because that's what's happening at a county level, at a coalition level, like, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think for me, if we want to step through that, I'm totally open to step through that, but recognizing, like, so I have that strategic plan that I've been working on. If something comes up in the community health assessment, I can't imagine that it's going to change dramatically from the last 3 years. That I don't, like, I can add in, hey, and this piece really is a public health, Lake County Public Health Agency specific piece that I can incorporate into my strategic plan that I currently have, or I'm working on, as Tim has seen it, and I'm bringing it to you guys as Board of Health in May. And so I think, you know, when I think about, you know, collaboration and what we do, I can't imagine us like not doing this in conjunction or utilizing LCBAG, like, in that respect. So is a question, I thought it was more around like, hey, recognizing like we need to do it. These are the pieces that we need to do. And Statements of Health, like, we're doing it as our stakeholders, but working with all of our other like nonprofits and our community partners to make sure that everyone has input and doing kind of that general survey. And then the focus groups, like we talked about, of, hey, maybe that's the opportunity where we want to tease out some other information or data that we might want specifically for the county.
That's a lot. I guess what I took away from Sarah's question was just sort of, not that, I don't want the BOCC to like get into like wordsmithing the survey.
No, the survey has nothing to do with it, I just want the contract.
But, yeah, but I think I like that idea of looking at the last community health needs assessment and like what survey questions were asked then, and based on things that have gotten done or not gotten done or emerging needs, or, you know, just we've learned a lot in the last 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're covering from, you know, COVID era, everything, you know, so I would just like to know that there has been some thought from all the partners about, you know, let's just not use the same survey for a long time. And I'm sure some thought has gone into that, or will go into it, but just, you know, that's what I took away from your question, making sure that the survey, it's gonna be one of the main feed-ins to this
Well,
work.
I'll start it and you can jump in. So the reason we use that survey is very different. It's from Santa Barbara, and the reason we want to utilize it, because we want to see a trend over time, like what has shifted. And I think the piece that you're looking for are truly those more specific questions where we can get that information from focus group. Because when you're doing this is like a broad stroke, like we are not here to dictate and pull information that we want specifically. And that's why by utilizing the same survey, you get that trend over time. And then, and that's when I reached out to say, hey, here's a survey I'd sent you, because that was your ask. And I sent that survey and I said, hey, here are the 4 questions specifically around housing, very vague. And I think it might fit in the, you know, fit better to get some of those specific, like, hey, but we really want to tease out that, which I think is totally appropriate, but not for the initial like survey broad stroke across the community. I had that conversation with Jackie as well about housing, and she felt, or I wouldn't say felt, like agreed. She's like, no, that makes sense. I'd rather do that like in the housing where I can get these things met and go from there. So I think that's kind of how I envision it, and why like I would ask that survey to stay the same, just so we can see like, hey, what has changed? Because that's the whole point, is that we're not here to say, hey, we need to know these 8 things versus how are you feeling and what's going on? And then if housing rises to the top and we have those bigger conversations, and if there's also a thought of, hey, we really want that information, I don't know that that is part of the community health assessment versus something separate that we can incorporate it in a way, if that makes sense.
That consistency over time makes a lot of sense.
Right, and then you're add to that.
I would just say, like, we're not like committed to 100% rigidity over time, right? Like, we got some feedback that like some of the questions were dumb or like very confusing, and so we're changing some of the wording or cutting some of the questions. And I think like we can add a few questions, but I do think that like 95% over time, like being able to track over time is important. And I giving it like at least like 2 runs before like ditching it for something else is worthwhile. And again, like we didn't make this up. Like it came from Santa Santa Barbara, they put a lot of money into it, we got permission to steal it, so,
Use it.
yeah.
That makes sense too. I mean, developing a survey takes a surprising amount of time to write that and write them well. So, yeah. And your point also that there's a lot of other sources of information coming in from focus groups and some of the other bullets.
Yeah, like last round was like deep COVID times, right? So like everything was online, and we've talked a lot about how we can change that this year and do more in-person things and bring in more partners so that like we can try to make this like as much as possible like a single catchment for like community survey, focus group, like question data collection. And so like working with other partners who might have like smaller surveys and like giving them like an in-person opportunity to dive a little deeper is definitely something that we're looking forward to doing this year.
Well, I think too, for like community connectors, as well as doing some of those more focus group is, you know, what are some of those ones that you really want to tease out? Because there's nothing wrong with throwing, you know, how we all roll, right? Love big old sheets on the wall, like, we want information on this one and how it ties into, you know, like if housing is rising, but I still think, to your point, like making sure that we are catching up on some of those pieces of, hey, and I apologize, I misunderstood that bigger question, I'm like, no, it's this. And so, you know, hearing a clarification of like, hey, what are some of those pieces? And that is something we can work on, like we can do a deeper dive, like at May, in our May Board of Health, like walking through it, like, hey, these are the pieces that we really want to know, and then we can figure out where to stick them in to like the whole process, so to speak, because it's like starting now until September. Hopefully we're done before that, because we have to write it all and get it done before September.
Yeah. Well, and that, go ahead.
There you go.
I didn't have concern around the survey questions, but I do think, I mean, I do have some questions or concerns about like the partner of BAG and like building trust and respect in your public health priorities. Is that really happening with builder generation right now? And also like the results of the community health assessment resulted in work and directives for BAG, which is not typical of contractors to do that for, and I think for themselves, you know, name themselves as then the next steps. And there was nothing, how many times was the department of the county named in the health assessment report?
What's the what?
A department of the county named in the health assessment? Zero.
Yeah,
Zero
I don't think we
times.
did because of what risen and what was already available. So basically, if you go back past the Health and Happiness Project, you'll see our other ones like 2017, like, oh, who is capacity? Oh, that looks like that is like Adequates of Lake County. They're doing the work on this particular topic. So it did follow that format in the sense of, hey, who has capacity, who's doing work around it? Great. Can they continue doing that work?
But it didn't actually outline that. And I think that in other conversations where we've had around like the senior center and those kinds of things, I mean, there were times we were in meetings where, you know, it was discovered by public health that C4 was offering home repair. So there's a lot of like outreach to community and getting that like through your public health strategic planning of like trying to reactivate and access engagement. And I think a lot of it has to be really, and maybe this has been happening and just needs to be communicated to us, like understanding what all those resources really are.
Right.
Because there's so much opportunity even in talking to Janine about TANF and CSU extension and relationships and all of those social determinants. Like I feel like it would be great to have that conversation to outline where there were opportunities that were made, wherever there was progress made by public health, and or what that meant to your department specifically, if it wasn't under housing or other things. And I think there's a lot of places where, you know, there could be some level of like role in housing, but I don't, you know, maybe it's not providing a service, because there are also not a lot of service providers named in there as responsible entities of like taking the information and doing something with it. You know, you could, public health could look at housing in like programming, just promoting programming.
And I think we do that strongly, and I think that's probably the pieces that we're not communicating effectively, hence like, if you did, sounds like you went through some of my strategic plan, like it's still in the draft form of we're not really good at advertising like all of those pieces and what we do, but we are connected behind the scenes. Like even when you brought up this before, like we're aware that we do communicate pretty continuously with it. And I think it was more like that one example that you're talking about was like, oh, we didn't recognize that piece, but we had these pieces and we're always talking. It wasn't like, hey, we have no idea what they do versus, no, we're actually in pretty constant contact.
With, okay, well, it was not.
With all the, no, but that's my point, is that not recognizing that, and I think it was one of those like, oh, we didn't know about that program. But now that we have this beautiful little, because I think that's also why.
Well, this is one of many, right?
Yeah,
Like
no,
one of many
exactly.
places where
Yeah.
linking resources
Right.
and just that consistency, like I think through my experience, we've often not given it enough value in just providing consistent communication, support, and basic consistency in programming. And it doesn't have to be like, right, you have in there, nothing necessarily shiny and new.
I know, no, and I think that's totally appropriate in trying to figure that out. I think, you know, the piece that I recognize, you know, and I kind of want to like keep these separate, because like the community health assessment, there could not be one single role other than, to your point, promoting what's happening because of what service to the top, as far as that goes. And so without doing the next one, like we don't know what public health play will be in it, or hey, everything came out to the top and now we have a much broader, we want to make sure that we're including all the other pieces, I guess, in a way that we might have missed, having gone back in a way, if that makes sense to you.
I guess so, and that's where I feel like working through that would be helpful to know that that's like where we're the starting point for the next.
Well, I don't think it changes the survey going out or us allowing, or contracting, you know, with Build Generation to do this work that they do well, and I feel like they are trusted and we have a strong relationship with them, so I don't feel that that's like an issue in that respect. Public health specifically.
Yeah, and something that might contribute to that is I mean, there were a couple suggestions for the deliverables. I mean, and maybe one is like really clearly add a bullet that, or either add a bullet or add into the list of like stakeholder groups or partners, some of the county departments, and also, I mean, like the housing authority as a joint one with the city, like just actually list those out as needing to be
Consulted? I mean, sure.
I mean, there's
But
obviously a whole bunch of.
I just, like,
that's
so much of
scratching
it
the
is
surface,
access
but-
and availability of recreation opportunities. And like the rec department wasn't named at all in doing any
Yeah.
programming. And that, well, nor
Or
was
goal.
any, well, goal
Or
was
goal.
mentioned
Yeah,
a little bit
Yeah.
as potential, but like nor were like the snowmobile club or the wheelers or archery or so many, so there were blinders on in this, and
For
it
that
was
HHP, for the
glaringly,
Happiness Project?
excuse me?
Yeah, for that Health and Happiness Project?
Yeah.
Right, and I'm wondering if we just pulled off of it.
And maybe is there opportunity to take the information gathered and then do, like, create, like, is it a separate document to create some action steps with it?
I think it's the awareness now of what do we need to add. I think what's really hard is receiving this feedback 3 years later. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, Colleen, it's your
presented.
job to bring it to us, to go through all of this stuff, which is part
No, but
of.
I am comfortable that, my point is, I'm comfortable about the last community health assessments, Health and Happiness Project, and I'm comfortable about where we're at and what we've done. I think the feedback piece being, this isn't mentioned, this isn't mentioned, this isn't mentioned, when this was presented, you know, 3 years ago, like, hey, this is what we're doing.
Well, I don't.
Because it's focusing, because the three that are elevated are housing, childcare, and livable wage.
Well, and I don't think necessarily it's something that we could have said 3 years ago we don't want to work on. But I think, at least in my work, and I don't know about your guys's, but I've never referred to the Health and Happiness Project as, like, we created a regional housing authority, check that off the box in the Health and Happiness.
Right, and capture that in right.
And so for me, really, when I look at the public health improvement plan, what I think of, and I may need more information on this through a Board of Health meeting or whatever, but I really look at that as public health improvement plan. Like, what are we going to do to improve our public health metrics? And so in this, it talks about, having Build a Generation be the agency responsible for the implementation and tracking of the plan. But what does that create any sense of liability for the county that we're not in control of any implementation of our public health improvement processes or or plans? And like, does that move us out of compliance if we're not driving the plan?
No, and I think that's the piece, is that we could, the whole thing is that every single thing that could come out in community health assessment, which then becomes a public health improvement plan, could have nothing to do with public health. Could have nothing to do with our core capabilities, or not, our public health priorities, our foundational services. Like, it could have nothing to do with it. It is your opportunity to plug in, depending on, but sometimes it's like totally like, we want this, like the community's asking for this, then it's like, oh, that's totally 100% public health agency specific way, if that makes sense. And so there's not like a liability piece of like, hey, your improvement plan has you doing none of the pieces that have been elevated. And I think that's when we talk about that social determinants of health and moving so much of what's happening upstream, right? Instead of a lot of what we do is direct services, and kind of talking to that quote of like, hey, people got to make it through their day. They have to have a housing, they have to have childcare before they even come through public health door, right? Or a lot of other doors, not just ours, right. In that respect. And I think that's like the piece of.
Well, but to that point, like, do we need something different now? Assuming maybe nothing changes in the top three priorities, which we are moving on and we had moved on before, right? The results of that, like, can we get something that helps build your strategic planning particularly,
right?
And or is, I
think that's not spelled out in particular in the proposed scope is, I have significant concerns partnering with St. Vincent Hospital on anything right now at this point. We hear from staff constantly that they're still in a position where they're not paying their bills. We don't actually know what's happening. We've asked for information on their consultant and have not received it.
Right.
And I personally believe that they need to do their own thing. They need to figure out what is happening at that hospital. They need to do their own thing. And it should not drive our public health goals, our overall public health goals.
I think though, I think we keep diving into wanting really specifics when a community health assessment is really generalized.
Well, so if I read the one from Chaffey County, like, they show availability of providers, substance abuse, lack of assisted living, lack of affordable housing, mental health, healthcare affordability, obesity, oral health, chronic disease, lack of detox, substance abuse treatment facilities, and transitional housing. Like, to me, those are not things that Heart of the Rockies Medical has any intersection on in this. This is like driving their public health plans, right? Like, that you can say, like, we want to take the lack of assisted living because that came out of the hospital and figure out what that plan is for people to age in place, because we know from senior center data, like, that might be, and so I really would like for this to be focused on public health and not St. Vincent Hospital, because they say it's going to take 4 years to come out of their financial hole. And my honest opinion is that they will not come out of that financial hole. I don't know the path forward. I don't see the path forward. I don't know that there's community support for a path forward. And I would hate to have a document that we're living with for 3 years that is tied to some goals that they have that may or may not be met. I mean, I have concerns about primary care that may or may not be met in our community. And if they're part of the player in this plan, I don't know how we move that forward if they close, right?
Right.
And I don't know if that comes out as a concern through the survey process, that, like, this is something that we want in our community and we're worried about the availability or the accessibility to a primary care provider. I'm just giving that as an example. And if we say, St. Vincent can provide that, and then 6 months later, they really can't provide that. I just worry about that and the trajectory of this plan. And I'm not saying that, you know, I don't believe that, you know, LC Bag's not capable of implementing the plan. I really just want to make sure that when we're talking about our public health improvement plan, that we're in compliance with what we have to do for our public health statutory requirements, like that. I guess just to clarify that, I'm not.
And
I'm not
also,
saying,
like, there's some big ideas in your strategic planning, like, do we actually need some feasibility studies specific to some of those big ideas, rather than a whole new health assessment plan right now? Like, where are you gonna spend your time engaging?
Well, I think we have to do it. This is statutorily supposed to be done on a timeline
Right.
basis.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
technically, to Sarah's point, is that our last one came out in 2020.
Yeah.
Our next one wouldn't be due until 25. If we decided to come out from under it, I will just tell you that that puts tremendous stress on you.
Okay.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah. Or, I'm sorry, it's your meeting, so.
I think like we keep talking about like the 3 priorities that came out of the plan, like those were like community-led priorities, but like plan intentionally includes like a lot more data around like everything else that was collected, and the idea was, and it sounds like maybe like this cycle, depending on where things land, like it'd be nice to have like more scheduled check-ins with Colleen, and I think I would be happy to be a part of them around like what's been happening in different areas, but the 3 community surfaced priorities were like the priorities of the community, but that doesn't preclude people from taking other pieces of the data in the report and setting priorities for rec department, DHS, Wheelers, right? Like, and using that plan as like, hey, like we successfully surveyed like a demographically representative portion of our community, got these results, like let's use that data in grants to support other programs. It was never the intention, I don't think, from our perspective, that like the plan, like the 3 community service priorities were the only things that could be. And that's why like so much more data was included in there, right? And that's why like specific questions about rec, even if like rec isn't one of the surfaced like high level priorities, or about specific access to care questions.
Sure. My proposal would be, Chris, I don't know what questions you have specifically on the scope. Would be for us to put this in on a work session with the Board of Health. Maybe we could even do it next week, if that's okay. And we work through this proposal in that work session and get to a point where we're comfortable to move forward with that. If that would be appropriate, and I think we can have the stakeholders in the group or in the room together to do that work session and do that and go from there. I don't know if you feel like that's appropriate or if you have additional questions.
I was gonna say, there are a lot of what y'all have talked about so far, things that came up in my mind when I was reviewing the, I think the proposal needs to be fleshed out. If there needs to be more specificity in there as to what the parameters are and what will be done and how it will, and stuff. And that was my concern. Is it's a pretty big deal, at least it seems to me, that it might need more than 2 pages to describe what the
The scope of
engagement
work?
is. Yeah,
Okay. And the deliverables?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly the deliverables.
Okay.
I'd love to have a work session.
Okay. Can we put that on the books?
Colleen, do you have availability?
Yes.
I think,
Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm sorry. The only day that I'm unavailable is the 11th, only days, I'm sorry, is the 11th and the 12th.
So the only day you're available is the 11th?
No, I'm unavailable, I'm unavailable the 11th and the 12th, because we have depositions set for the 11th.
Okay. So the 13th, I'm pretty wide open. Like I can move some stuff around. The only thing I have is a meeting at 3 o'clock with the county manager. If Thursday sounds better. I mean, Monday is also wide open for me.
What do you guys want to do? I mean, I'm fine with Monday too, like Monday morning.
But yeah, Monday morning's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Thursdays might be pretty packed.
Yeah, you're gonna do Monday morning? You're gonna do like Monday at 10 or 11?
Does that work for you, Colleen?
Yeah, Monday is usually a really good day for me.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Oh, thank you.
Let's do 10 to
10 to 12?
noon.
Yeah, we could do that.
And just so that I understand, like, not just a proposal, because I feel like there's so much like conversation happening about like our past plans. Would it be helpful to bring, like, I can talk about the process, I can talk about, like, I just want to, because I mean, obviously that's just in a couple of days, a week away.
Well, I think for me, maybe.
Yeah, so like, that'd be really helpful, so like, okay, now I know how to come in, because I just feel, like I said, I felt a little overwhelmed, but I just more because I'm like, that's a lot of information that.
Yeah,
I have to go back and
totally.
get. But I'm willing to do it, so thank you.
I think I would propose like going through the proposal and adding any additional language that you may want to see in there, or any comments or questions on that shared document, would be my initial request. And then I think just talking through maybe what the process was in 2020, what it would be proposed to look like in.
Yeah, and I think to Noah's point, like, this is a great opportunity, like, please recognize that, you know, we did this during like a pandemic. And so I think, you know, there's opportunity for that improvement piece, and I'm fully open for that. I think it's just more of a like, just understanding what else needs to come to the table. And I think the other piece that I really need to understand, because that might be a wedge question as well, as far as, hey, we're not gonna do it with you, but, and timing wise, like, great, hey, we're not gonna do it in conjunction with St. Vincent Health and they're doing their own thing, that might change, you know, what else BAG needs to do, that might change, because they have ownership of that survey, and so that might mean really going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out what might that look like in the scheme of it all. So I think, you know, my request is like, hey, think about that opportunity to like bridge that relationship a little bit with St. Vincent Health. Is like, hey, if I have to do that, just that bridge for this particular thing, like, hey, we don't agree with so many of these other things, which you can imagine how I feel on those as well, of what they're doing or how they're operating. But we do, you know, but if there's an opportunity, but we do support the importance of, you know, partnering with a community health assessment, if that makes sense. Because if we really think it's off the table, then I'm gonna tell you that my 2023 health assessment will be off the table, because I'm not gonna interfere with what they need for their, you know, what they need to get done in 2023, so.
Okay.
Your health assessment? Sorry.
I would not want to do, they need to compute,
A separate?
They need to do, for their timelines, they need to have theirs done by the end of this year. If we think we are not partnering with them, I'm not doing a separate one this year, because we can't compete, like, that is not fair to our community. They're like, hey, answer all those questions, but answer ours, even though 90% of them might overlap.
Sure. Right,
And our
right,
10%
right,
might be different, versus like, hey, we're looking, and, you know, versus, hey, you know what, we want this, because, right, I'll get that direction as you guys as a board of health, of like, hey, we really want it to change, and this is what we want it to look like, great, then you need to give me 2 years to get it there.
Right.
I just think, you know, the hard part is that,
We haven't seen the decision from St. Vincent yet.
yeah, so that's my point, it's like, hey, just recognize that that is a huge part of it, and if we're really gonna be like, hey, we totally feel really strong, like Monday I walk in, like, hey, we feel strongly that we're not doing it, then I'd be like, we're tabling it, you know,
Okay.
to a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that we would be understanding and respectful of the generation's time and St. Vincent Hospital's time to talk through that for sure.
Okay.
And I really just want to say that I appreciate being open to having conversation and continuing this conversation on Monday, because, you know, like we're operating on a different playing field than we were in 2020.
Agreed,
So,
and not to say in some of those pieces too, like, hey, and it's not like, I think there's opportunities to obviously, permit and bring everything to fidelity where, you know, just because of everything that we've had, last 2 years, so.
yeah, for sure.
So on Monday, I'd love to talk about, right, the progress and then what public health
Yeah,
needs
so that's,
from what
yes.
for the
Yes,
next
I'm
3
sorry.
years.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and then I guess based on the result of that, in the conversation Monday.
Okay, nope, that sounds great, and I
where-
understand that.
Awesome.
Cool. Jeff, what about you?
Anything you want me to bring specifically?
Sorry, my brain is like swirling on the St. Vincent Health question. It's just like, I mean, totally get all your points. They do exist though, so to me, it's almost like the discussions it's like a bigger picture, like we've been having with ambulance service about like needing some contingency planning in place for when, or, you know, some very short emergency contingency planning if, like, they don't make payroll on date X and disappear.
Yeah.
Like really
So if you
fast.
say anything, I've got your neck, you
You know, what does that mean?
Yes.
For meeting community health needs? You know, I mean, some of the stuff we just don't control, you know. Anyway, that was a swirling answer to the swirl in my brain about like the St. Vincent Health question.
Yeah.
I had a couple like smaller edits on the scope of work that I can just like throw into the mix.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So Monday works.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. I appreciate you saying that. All right, now for the other two.
Okay.
Which should hopefully be really straightforward. Because person's already pointed. So be number 11.
Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff just ran into the restroom real
thanks.
quick and will be.
So everything is correct now. Just if you could quickly just look at those 18, 19, 20, 21. Make sure that that meets the intent of what you wanted to do.
Do this holidays. Yeah. This was their other.
Yeah. Those 19 through 20, the parking was
Yeah.
incorporated into one.
Should those look okay? And if they do, then this is ready for signature.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay.
we're back.
All right, we concluded item 13 and we are back to item 11.
Yeah.
And we have 11, 12, and 14, and then reports, minutes, payroll, and bills. Okay, 11, consideration of a medical officer professional service agreement with Rocky Mountain Family Practice to provide medical advice and orders for the Lake County Public Health Agency. Go ahead, Colleen.
So as you guys know, we have, every year, we appoint, you, along with, our consideration is a medical officer. It allows us to do all the work that we do under public health for like our nursing population, do standing orders that allow us to do all our direct service pieces that include communications, family planning, as well as blood lead. And so with that being said, in the past, we have utilized an MOU, and Chris was very, I'm like trying to think of all the right word. No, just thought that like, hey, an MOU just doesn't cut it. How's that? And that we needed a professional contract. And so as you know, that there was a little bit of touch and go around Dr. Zillinger, who had resigned with the intent to be done in March, but was going to stay on until we get somebody else. But reconsidered after multiple conversations and trying to figure out what works for all of us. And so she is willing to continue. And this is just formalizing that agreement and going from there. Does that sound?
Yeah, in essentially, we met with Dr. Lisa to go through the agreement and negotiated some revisions and stuff, but it's our professional services agreement that's been customized to reflect the type of services, and it is not with her personally, it is with her practice. Because of issues related to insurance, as well as if there's situations where she's not available, but she has another associated physician that can help out, you can't do that under just a personal services agreement. So the way it is now, and I sent the revised version based on the changes you requested, we negotiated stuff to her last week. I have not received that back yet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I hadn't heard back from her in terms of if there was anything else. So
Okay.
my recommendation today would be to approve it pending final legal. I sent her the clean
Final
copy.
legal review and no huge substantive
yes,
changes.
exactly.
So then
Yeah.
it's just
And usually,
revisit.
Yeah, because we left that meeting understanding that what I put into the document that I sent to her was what we
Great.
agreed on.
So
So
that's-
I don't expect there's gonna be anything.
Yeah, I would
just
say
haven't
it's
received
usually
anything
she's
back.
very responsive that way.
Yeah.
Almost like no news is good news. From what I've experienced with her, like those.
Excellent. Excellent, okay. Great. I'll entertain a motion for approval of our professional services agreement for appointment of medical officer with Rocky Mountain Family Practice.
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
just to reiterate that, and again, pending
Oh.
final.
Yeah.
Pending final.
You wanna
I'll amend the
amend
motion
that? I'm sorry.
to include pending final.
Okay. Alrighty, any other discussion on that?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Nothing?
hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Great, thanks. And then Colleen, the next item 12 is a consideration of our agreement with Patagonia Health for electronic health record services for the Lake County Public Health Agency, and this is a renewal of our engagement, right?
We're gonna look at you, like we're both looking at each other. And so I think I think there's.
Is that meeting all your needs?
It appears that we are able just to continue to go monthly as it's written because they haven't come back.
It's not monthly, it's really weird. What they
Right.
presented,
So it's
I
like,
sent Colleen a document that said that that says purpose to renew, the subscription for 5 years, but then it goes into the actual terms of the renewal that don't link it to a multi-year contract. The master agreement that we signed off on last year, the original one, has an automatic annual renewal
Right.
with and it's adjusted, the fees are adjusted according to the
appropriate.
CPI.
yeah.
Each year on a certain percentage. So I wrote back kind of like, I'm confused as to why we're doing this. If it's just adding the reduction in the fees and the training in the document they sent, that's not linked to it being a multi-year, but then they came back and said, well, we can't offer you the multi-year unless you, or we can't offer you the discount or
And some of
the
training pieces that
the
come with it.
training if you don't accept a multi-year contract.
That would be, like, we would get the discount and then we would pay for, which we do now, like, if there's anything above and beyond what is part of the training, like, hey, we need this, and it wasn't part of that, then and it's actually pretty reasonable, but to your point, and I haven't had a response back from them, so I guess the question is, obviously, we're gonna continue with them in our, like, as our master contract rolled into.
Yes,
an
it
annual
automatically,
review.
it actually automatically renewed at
Yes.
the end of March, because I think it was the end of March.
It'll renew tomorrow, actually.
Okay, because I was gonna say, that was what
The
the
master
original
agreement.
Yeah.
agreement said.
Yeah.
So,
it doesn't really matter, and if there's some termination clause in there that allows us to exit at any
it
point.
does, and that's my concern, is because my concern is, if they want to lock us in for 5 years under this document they sent, and there's an automatic renewal provision, that means it automatically renews for 5 years going forward.
Oh,
And I'm
Oh,
like,
so
no,
yeah,
no, no,
that's
no,
right. So
I don't wanna, and the part of the question is too, how are the services? Are they the best provider? I don't know if you wanna get trapped into a multi-year.
Well, and that's kind of what we were saying, like, hey, I'm comfortable with where we're at, and I do think what's been great is that they have expanded services, not only for us, but for other public health agencies. Actually, Eagle County's coming up the first week of May, because they've now contracted with them, and you wanna just walk it through to see how our nurses use it. And so if anything, they have gained traction in a positive way to be kind of a uniting electronic health record for our state, so to speak. It's not there yet, they've got, that's way out, as you guys know, everyone has to contract how they feel works for them. So we have received services, they're really responsive, and if anything, they wouldn't terminate, because as you guys can imagine, it's like, we continue to make suggestions and they keep taking them, and we're making their
product better is part of it.
I feel
so-
like, right, that's the bottom line.
Well, part of the bottom line though is they're offering a 2% discount, which comes out to $27 a month.
Yeah.
$27 a month.
Well, and that's also too, because
If you agree to a
so it
5-year.
doesn't seem like there's a lot of urgency to do this today.
Well, initially,
Because
that's what we didn't
They
understand that.
they came back and said that, essentially,
just-
well, you can just continue with the
yes.
original
And
contract,
that
in
just
which
came out
case
literally like on Thursday or Friday,
Yeah,
Friday, I
yeah,
think
so-
it was.
you don't need to do this, but if you want the discount and additional training, then we need this document to be a multi-year.
$27 a
Yeah.
month.
It's the 2% discount they're giving. Yeah.
What do you mean?
For a 5-year.
No, but
So
for
here's
5 year.
the thing, it's a
Well,
5-year
I
contract.
hear
We
you.
can't obligate ourselves,
So
that's
what-
what we
what
said
is
about
it
it, we
worth?
should not be
And
obligated.
that's what I said.
$27 a month,
I know.
or,
And I put a provision in there,
5-year
that it's
commitment.
subject, it's conditioned on, appropriation then, and they were like, they don't want that, they want to lock us in for the 5 years, and part of me is like, well, yeah, they might be great now, but this is an area that might be changing,
And who knows,
in
because
5
maybe
years.
the state all of a sudden is like, hey, we've decided this, and you're like, all right.
Yeah, no more
then it becomes-
Patagonia, or they get sold, or.
Yes.
so to have the
Like, who knows?
flexibility and not have a 5-year.
No, I know, I think,
I'm-
and so that's why, like, it was still on the agenda,
Are you
because as
fine
of
with
Friday,
that?
we didn't have this information.
Oh, okay.
And so we're like, okay, then why did you?
Well, but
Which
wanting
is-
to explain to y'all why.
Why,
Got it.
yes, that's why we
Don't-
left it on.
Just don't
Okay.
do it,
Got
just
it.
say, we'll
So
just
there's
leave
no
things the way
action
it
items
is.
at this time?
No.
Great.
We need to
So we
take
don't
it.
have to take,
You do
we don't
not.
actually have to take action on that. Great.
Well, yeah, that
We are in an
unless you wanna
agreement.
say that you're in agreement not to pursue the renewal, amended renewal for 5 years. That would be the only thing. is
Right,
that-
and right now it just renews yearly.
Yeah, it's just, it automatically renews year to year.
Sure, we can do that for clarification. So I'll entertain a motion, not to entertain the amendment agreement with Patagonia Health to include the 5-year term.
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion?
None, thank you.
Okay, hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
And then,
And
I just,
do you want me to respond back to them with that?
well, because I wrote that back to them, and they're just like, do this, what would you do it? I haven't heard back, but no, I'm comfortable. It's just like, oh, I get prepared, just renew. I'm like,
Okay, no problem.
yes.
Thank you. All
Sorry,
right, I think we are on our final new agenda item, and I see Kim is still with us online.
Thank you, Kim.
Dang.
Can you hear us?
So our 14th item is the consideration of a lease agreement for county property. Hi, Kim. Well, it's with the Mount Albert Motocross, managed by Jeff and Kim Kigu. for the amount of $1,000 annually. This is a renewal of the existing space out at the end of County Road 23.
Yeah, so, sorry, Sarah, I didn't
No,
mean to cut you off.
go for it.
So in speaking with Chris, we need to just update the
Legal
legal
description?
description to be the actual motocross track, which we will do and update the term of the motocross agreement because it was 10 years, expired on November 30th, 2022, and I apologize, Kim, for it taking this long to get to. So we just need to come up with a term of what the agreement needs to be, 10 years and for a dollar amount to be paid to us for the lease of the property. Kim and Jeff stay at the property all summer. I have not ever heard a negative comment about the property since it's been open since 2012. I've never had a negative comment about the property or the management of the property or anything. I think they do a fine job. Those would be the only three things that I think we need to fix. Chris, I think if you can put that into just a formal lease document with that
Well, and that's
information.
what I think too, is that this is the opportunity to review the existing lease that's been placed, for what they just expired essentially. And if there aren't any other changes or stuff that need to be made, we can do a simple amendment to extend the term with the correct
dollar amount.
Correct legal description and what the revised rent.
Yeah, I was thinking that because, we kind of revisited this with the water lease for Mill Massive Golf Course, and we're looking at that master leasing, and we're getting the cost recovery stuff. I don't actually have a problem with the long-term term, but maybe we should just do this annually so that we, for the sake of consistency, apply whatever outcomes result from cost recovery and conditions we might put in a lease with
a dollar amount?
with everyone. Like maybe it is $1,000 for the year and the term is a year to maybe automatically renew, if not revisited, but just in the spirit of trying to get that consistency as best we can.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. We've come across like tons of leases and agreements that have like multi-year, decade terms that just get locked in. So yes.
Michael, go ahead, you have a comment?
I just wanted to mention that we might want to take into account the FAA also. And if anything wants to happen outside of that fence and the term of the lease, if we make it a really long lease, it makes it really hard to get out of, unless we put something in there saying because of the FAA or because of an airport requirement, we have
To have the ability to terminate if it's inconsistent with FAA requirements.
Like if FAA changes the requirement.
Or something, yeah, comes up with them that they.
So that we can protect both Kim's organization and ours.
Yeah, well, and what it would be is that in terms of FAA, if they were to have some sort of new regulation or requirement for our airport, I don't think your actions can supersede their control over that. And so entering into a lease with another private party for use of property that they have the ability to regulate in some way is not, you're not gonna be able to enforce that. And so I think Michael's got a good point to make sure that there are provisions in there that say that it's subject to, the renewal be subject to annual appropriation and to, it being consistent with then current FAA regulations.
Well, we don't, and as far as annual appropriation goes, like we don't pay them anything.
No, I know, but without any annual appropriation, yeah.
Annual
but in terms of
automatic
renewal,
Okay.
yeah, subject to, any regulatory authority the FAA may have over the property.
Kim, do you have any questions about any of that?
I will say having it annually makes it a little more difficult for fundraising for us. And then I understand about the FAA land because I know, because I've been with the club. So obviously, I understand the deal with the land there. The only thing that, just the annual lease makes it less attractive for people to want to donate with us.
Yeah, and so Kim, the way it would work is that even though it's it has the initial 1-year term, it would automatically renew unless a certain period of time, advance notice was given for the termination. And so, it's and the impression I'm getting from the commissioners is it's unlikely to be terminated unless something comes up with either the operations or the FAA or something like that.
Or to kill the same bird, like, could we do a 5 or 10 year lease, but with some provisions in there that say maybe some of the terms will be revisited after, like,
Annually, you can, but it'll still be subject to annual appropriation if you do a multi-year lease.
Bless you.
Could we do 5 years?
Yeah, I mean,
I would just recommend 4 years.
Oh,
Or
okay,
as you guys rotate, that
okay.
each set of commissioners.
Committers.
Committers, yes, have the opportunity to review and see if it's in their best interest.
Okay. Kim, does that sound appropriate?
Well, we'll take it.
Okay.
Like, we'll take it. We just want to be there and, especially for the kids in Lake County. So,
you guys do a great job.
Yeah.
thank you. We love, how the local kids, ride up from their houses, after school, and we get to know their parents and kind of insert ourselves into their education to make sure they're keeping their grades up. So it's fun to be a part of. Thank you for letting us do it.
So essentially, the amendment to the lease then that I'll try to put together would have the new term starting, it expired, you said November 2022, at the end of that month, whatever, to start, to be consistent with the new term, if you will, for you, so that it would be a rolling 4-year there.
Okay, that will work. Okay. You guys
Great.
feel okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep, I mean, it's need to get that legal description.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Accurate.
could send that, somebody could send that to me so I can incorporate it.
Sounds good. And then Kim will be in touch with you to get a signature on the amendment. Yes?
Yes, yeah. I can email that over to you once I get it drafted.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you all. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for your patience. Sorry.
It's okay. I sat during one of my classes listening to you and my class.
All right, so I will make a motion that we approve the amendment to the motocross lease with Jeff and Kim Kibu in the amount of $1,000 to include an updated legal description of the property, the updated lease amount, and the updated term of the lease for a rolling 4-year period.
I'll second.
And so it is still $1,000 a year?
Yeah, I'm gonna say annually.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion?
None for me, thank you.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Great, and reports, minutes, bills, and payroll. Tracy, just a couple of comments on your question marks in your March 7th.
I couldn't determine what the acronym was.
MMOF. Multimodal, I don't know what.
Opportunity funds? I don't know, I'll get the name for you.
I tried to find it.
Okay, I will get the name for you.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd one, I didn't have a chance to go back to the reporting and see if I misspoke, but they're speed radar signs, not speed camera signs. And I believe camera signs would be illegal. So if I misspoke, we could correct. Well, right, we could just capture that in the minutes of this meeting to
Or it
correct it.
doesn't- or it
Right,
doesn't have to be.
we can't correct what I actually said.
Right,
If I said it wrong, then I said it wrong. But they will be radar signs. So if I said camera on March 7th, I misspoke.
Yeah.
I think state law does not allow camera signs except in certain places.
Okay.
Like schools and something. Which should be changed.
Funding from MMOF to implement the shuttle transit route. And then you just noted current funding is good for 5 years of matching, and then you said after that, they may go to the city for additional funding. I'm not sure if is that actually, after the 5 years?
No, next year we'll go to the city for, to ask for funding to, help carry the cost of the match.
That's what I thought. Okay.
But I can listen to the recording and put those words in there with the MMOF, whatever that stands for.
Okay.
So don't approve them.
Okay, so we
Compare
can
and
hold
listen
those
to
for the
them.
next meeting, and I'll go back to the recording and listen to them.
And I'll have the other ones ready too.
Okay, cool, that sounds good. Thanks, Tracy.
Multimodal Transportation and Mitigation Options Fund. MMOF. And I would love it, I mean, I personally would love it, but we could just spell out all our acronyms.
I was thinking, just put that and then MMOF in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move those to the next one.
All right, we will table those, and I don't think we have anything else.
All right.
No, all right, great, thank you all. After that, 3:02, we will adjourn.
All right, thank you so much.
Much appreciated.
Showing the stage, and this one's ready now.
And we're way over projection.
I just want all of